Greetings everyone. Hello, my name is Manuela Arciniegas and my pronouns are she, hers. I am the director of the Andrus Family Fund and your MC for this afternoon or this morning. I join you today from unceded territory, Lenape land in Goshen, New York. As you join us, I encourage you to name yourself with your name, your pronoun, and in the chat, kindly let us know your name, your organization, where you're calling from, and your pronouns. Saludos a todos. Mi nombre es Manuela Arciniegas y yo soy la directora del Andrus Family Fund. Mis pronombres son ella. Me comunico desde el territorio Lenape en Upstate New York, el pueblito que se llama Goshen. Favor de indicar su nombre, pronombre, la organización y el territorio de donde se comunican. And drop that in the chat. Inclúyanlo en el chat. En estos momentos los voy a introducir a Luis López y Mayra Mateo, nuestros traductores intérpretes para esta tarde. Luis.
Buenas tardes, good afternoon. Soy Luis Lopez, I'm Luis Lopez. Also sitting currently on unceded Lenape lands, and it's good to be here. I'm just going to give you a few instructions for this session, which will be interpreted into Spanish, or we'll be speaking in English and Spanish, and I will repeat the same information in both languages, so please bear with me. Buenas tardes, les saludo desde territorios no cedidos del pueblo Lenape y me llamo Luis López, voy a ser uno de sus intérpretes hoy, mi compañera Mayra Mateo también está presente. Les voy a dar unas instrucciones acerca de cómo conectar con la interpretación en unos momentos. Todavía no se activó la función en la base de su pantalla, en Zoom, así que después de dar esta presentación es cuando pueden conectar con ella. En el chat acabo de poner unas instrucciones para que las tengan por escrito como referencia también. En unos momentos cuando se conecte van a ver, si están conectados por computadora, verán un globo en la base de su pantalla. Pinchen en el globo y esa es la opción de interpretación y seleccionen si están escuchando en español y es su idioma preferido, elijan español. Y luego, después de eso ya seguirán escuchando todo. Según se hable en inglés, lo escucharán en español. Si se cambiase el idioma al español, oirían eso directamente. Si están conectados por teléfono celular o por tableta, para activar la interpretación tienen que tocar los 3 puntos en la esquina de su pantalla, donde tienen más opciones o more en inglés, y ahí verán interpretación de idiomas o language interpretation. Toquen en español y luego presionen done o terminar para que se active y de ahí funcionará igual. Si tienen algún problema técnico con esto, por favor pongan un mensaje en el chat y trataremos de resolverlo. So I posted some written instructions in the chat as well on how to activate your interpretation if you need it. And if you're connected via computer, there'll be a globe that pops up on your screen as soon as we're done with this introduction. You click on the globe, select English if that's your preferred language, and then you're done for the rest of the session. If English is being spoken in the main room, you will not hear our voices as interpreters because you'll hear that directly. If Spanish is spoken in the main room, then you will hear our voices come in. You don't have to do any other changes and you just keep listening. If you're connected through a tablet or a cell phone, the same option is available by touching on the 3 dots on the corner of your screen where you have more options and selecting language interpretation from the menu that pops up and selecting your language. And then after that, you touch done and you should be all set for the session. Thank you very much. If you have any technical problems with this, please post in the chat and we'll try and set you up. Thank you. Mayra, do you want to say anything?
Okay, thank you so much, Luis and Mayra. We will do our best to speak at an even pace so that translation is seamless for you all. So welcome everybody on behalf of the Andrus Family Fund, our parent fund, the Surdna Foundation, and the Wellspring Philanthropic Fund's Racial Justice Program. I'm really excited to welcome all of you today. The Andrus Family Fund partners with organizations who help make the connections that our most marginalized young people desperately need to lead long and successful lives. We believe that every young person has a right to more than one opportunity at a good life. So today's event was born from the feedback of our movement partners who expressed an interest in learning more about narrative change. Our partners recognize their work must contend for the hearts and minds of not only BIPOC communities, but also the mainstream United States, so that as a society, we can work together to undo the enduring legacy of systemic and structural racism that impacts the young people we serve, limits their access to health, equity, justice, and a number of other inalienable rights. So our goal for today is that you all, movement partners, both from Andrus Family Fund, Wellspring, Youth First State Advocacy Fund, Communities for Just Schools Fund, the Funders Collaborative on Youth Organizing, the Visionary Freedom Fund, the Surdna Foundation. Our goal is that you will all be introduced to the most cutting edge work happening across the country by leaders and organizations actively working to shift narratives and build power for communities. We hope you leave with a clearer understanding of what is the narrative change landscape, a sense of who some of the key players are. We hope you're inspired by some of the approaches of our presenters, and ultimately you leave with some connections or ideas to support your work ahead. Today is designed as a series of small TED Talks, mini workshops, both in this main room and in one or two other additional breakout rooms. As I speak, my comrade Nayoka Acevedo, our program officer, will drop the agenda into the chat. Because the presentations are very brief, we ask that you use the chat to type in any questions to your presenters and that you observe the allotted times in as disciplined a format as possible. We invite you to journal any aha moments that you have, or even drop them in the chat, and encourage our presenters, use all of the tools, your emojis, your thumbs, your smiles, to ensure that they can see some feedback from you and be engaged in ways that will encourage and nurture the direction of the conversation. Finally, out of respect for them, we just hope that you will again be gracious and re-enter the main room after every breakout session. When you come back to the main room, we will let you know what the next set of breakout sessions are and send you swiftly on your way. We are dropping in the chat the agenda for the day, so you have some more information both about the bios, the presenters, and the topics they'll cover. The event today will be recorded. And we also have a graphic recorder, Neha, who's with us and will be floating through some of the various rooms. Thanks, Neha, for being with us. We just hope that you all have a very, very informative afternoon and stick around for the end of the day where we'll go out into breakout sessions and start to make meaning about some of the things we've learned and heard. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce you to my colleague, Javier Torres. He is the director of the Thriving Cultures program at Surdna Foundation, and he has served as a thought partner for me on developing the program for today, as have many of the presenters who you see with us. So Javier, feel free to take it away. Thank you all.
Thank you, Manuela. Good afternoon, everyone. Really thrilled to be here with you today and to get to learn alongside all of you. As the director of the Thriving Cultures team, I've had the opportunity to deepen my own knowledge about narrative and culture change, and have gotten to work with some amazing partners that you'll get to hear from today that are committed to building a resilient narrative and culture change infrastructure that can support passionate artists, cultural leaders, cultural practitioners, and creative individuals in connecting, leading, partnering with, and supporting the work of our movement partners across the country for all of the many intersectional movements for justice that exist and that Surdna and AFF are committed to supporting. They are the ones that work every single day with the lion's share of the work. And it's been exciting to work with folks that you'll hear from today, like the PopCulture Collaborative, who've created funder learning ecosystems so that we can understand how to better support this work. You'll hear from Fabiana today, who's one of our partners at the Center for Cultural Power, who's leading our work with the Constellations Fund, a new philanthropic entity that we've been able to develop to support this work, and others that I think you'll really enjoy. I'm excited for this agenda, really thrilled for all of the partners that Manuela and AFF have pulled together, and looking forward to getting to know you. So Manuela, without further ado, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you, everyone. And then I'll kick it over to Saida to just share some last minute logistics, and then we'll move on to our keynote. Go ahead, Saida. You're on mute, Z.
Okay, sorry about that. Saida Sedano, she, her pronouns. I'm the program associate for the Andrus Family Fund. I'll be on deck for all the tech today, and wanted to share a few instructions. We'll be using Zoom live transcription. I've just enabled it right now, so you should be able to click on the CC icon located at the meeting controls on the bottom and select show subtitles. You should then see the captions at the bottom of the screen. We will be also using breakout rooms quite a bit later on. You'll be able to self-select a room. You can access the breakout room through the window pane. You should be able to, yeah, the little window pane icon right there. And then you'll have the little window pop up. You can click join and you'll be able to join. If you're unable to see the join button, please just raise your hand, use the raise hand icon, and I'll assist you with that. And I'll turn it back to you, Manuela.
Thank you, everyone. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I would love to have you join me in welcoming Amity Paye from Color of Change. AFF has been a proud partner of Color of Change for about 4 years now. And so we're really excited that they're going to set the stage for the importance of narrative change and building power. So Amity, welcome and thank you for being with us.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me. And hello, everyone. It's great to see everyone's faces on a Zoom meeting. Good to not have just the name boxes. I'm going to share my screen quickly. Here we go. Can you all see this? Present. Yes, I'm seeing head shakes. So I will say that is working. Okay. So are you all seeing just the, I'm gonna make sure you're seeing the full presentation screen, right? Yes, wonderful. So I want to start off by telling y'all a little story. So in 2020, my organization, Color of Change, found that people's expectations of police in real life were different depending on whether they were watching crime TV shows like Cops or The Rookie. Since most people don't interact with police on a weekly basis, these very popular shows were the main source of learning about how police should behave in the real world. But when we looked at those TV shows, we found that their narrative about police was actually false, just to put it nicely. They're totally false. They were regularly depicting hero police characters sort of breaking the law in the name of justice. They were using people of color to endorse bad behavior, so that behavior wouldn't look harmful. And they often simply just pretended that racism didn't exist at all. They would have Black characters discover racism at 40 years old, just not real. And what we found is it was a narrative that was actually developed by police consultants in Hollywood, to blind the public from what they would actually do in real life, so that people would accept bad behavior more easily. Meanwhile, COVID, this was early 2020, so COVID pandemic was just starting. And at COC, we knew that Black communities would have an outsized impact, as they always do. But as we started actually getting news stories about Black people feeling that impact of COVID, we noticed a really harmful and pervasive narrative spreading across the news and social media. And it was that Black people were dying of COVID. And you actually still see this, in news headlines today. Black people are dying at higher rates than anyone else. This was a narrative that actually, was sort of unintentionally blaming Black people for their own oppression, even as that oppression was actually killing them. Black people aren't dying from COVID at higher rates were actually being killed by a racist healthcare system that provides less care and less access over centuries, right? But by saying that Black people are dying, it looks like it's our fault. It looks like, you know, our communities just die. Like, you drop dead something, you did something wrong, versus someone kills you, you know, there's a different target there. And so we decided to really work on changing these two narratives at the same time, right? It's two different examples, but two examples of narrative that had to change in order for our society to be better for all of us. And so we, for COVID, we started saying, like, Black people aren't dying. Actually, Black folks are saving the world right now. Black people are overrepresented in the essential workers that, you know, we're really saving the country, saving people's lives in hospitals, that type of thing. And it was a big but important narrative shift. With policing, we're doing the same thing. We're actually changing those narratives of, like, okay, you can't just break the law and save the day in real life. We don't want to see that on TV. And so we always say that it's important to talk about race, but the way that you talk about race is even more important. And that's what we're going to talk through today. It's what the whole day is about, is narrative, right? The way that you talk about things. And the stories we tell and the narratives we present really actually have the power to shape behavior. And that's the goal, right? Is like, you're all organizers, you're all social justice advocates. And we want to shape behavior, not just the way that people think and talk about things, but the way they behave after hearing those messages. And so, you know, especially in a culture that's filled with stereotypes and systemic inequities, it's essential that we're really intentional about the narratives that we provide, so that we're creating authentic, honest, and forward-moving representations of our communities. So these two stories show the ways that narrative can have power and impact behavior. Go to my next slide if it'll let me. So my name is Amity Paye. I'll take a step back. I'm the interim chief marketing officer, marketing and storytelling officer at Color of Change. And so as a chief storyteller, I always like to start with stories. I always find that you get better grounding, understand what we're talking about a little bit more when you start with a story. But let me tell you, like, a little bit more about Color of Change and how we actually do narrative work. So Color of Change is the nation's largest online racial justice organization. We help people respond effectively to injustice in the world around us. And we have a national force of 7 million members that are working together to drive decision makers in corporations and government to create a more human, less hostile world for Black people in our country. And yeah, we specialize in telling stories that inspire racial justice and spark tangible change. And a lot of how we do that is through narrative. So big picture, give us some definitions and some pieces to work with. Narrative is a big buzzword, right? As you hear it all over the place, everyone wants to work on narrative in the social justice world right now. But as much as people are talking about it, we still really need to get on the same page about what it actually is. And at Color Change, we define narrative as a couple different things. Humans understand the world through stories. So narrative change is the strategy of shifting the meaning within the stories that we tell. And in terms of impact, narrative change is the act of shaping public opinion and influencing policy. And we can do that in lots of other ways, but narrative is focused on storytelling and messaging. And so, yeah, we're trying to influence the way people think and feel, right? And then behave because of those feelings and thoughts. And how people think and feel is really dictated by how they can connect to the stories that we tell. And narrative change gives meaning to those actions. People don't really easily connect to complex facts or figures, but people more easily connect to the stories that we're telling. And if you connect to, hearts and minds of other people through narrative change, that will drive, social, political, cultural change from those people as well. If we, in the two stories I told you, if we're telling people that, you know, people aren't dying from COVID. Maybe if we're telling them that people are killing another person, maybe they take action, right? Rather than feeling sorry. Driving that hearts and minds connection is really important. And so often I will say we do this without even realizing it. You know, it's like the ways that everyone talks about the world, often, especially as communicators of color, often we just pick up on those. We repeat things that others say. And so it's really important in our narrative work to challenge the thing that everyone else is saying. Is that actually helpful to our communities? Is it true? Is it, you know, does it reinforce a stereotype that maybe isn't helping? We got to challenge even the most basic narratives about our country in order to really help people make that change and make that connection to the actions we want them to take. So for Color of Change, we do narrative a couple different ways. We're leading campaigns with the goal of building real power for Black communities. And so our campaigns teams are challenging injustice and holding corporation and corporate leaders accountable. And our narrative work in that space is really about, you know, making tweaks to the language, like the COVID example. Or, you know, if we're thinking about divesting from police, maybe divesting isn't comfortable to people, but expanding public safety is. And that's really what's happening now anyhow. So making those tweaks so that people can really understand and not be scared by the changes that we're proposing in the world. We do this across a range of different campaigns. So we're working on criminal justice, culture change, media justice, voting rights, freedom, democracy work. We've got tech accountability. We got it all in all these different places, but all across the board, across all these different issues, we're doing the same thing. We're tweaking that narrative of like, okay, what are people saying about tech? Is that true for Black people? We focus on Black community. And so we say, is that true for Black people? Is there a way that we could change this narrative to make people more likely to take the actions that we need in order to make the change we want to see? So that's one way we do it in our campaigns. And the other way we do it is in Hollywood, is like actually getting into the writers' rooms, getting behind the scenes and challenging culture before it reaches the public. And so in this example of crime TV, what we're doing now is we're actually working with writers' rooms. We're working with The Rookie and with Brooklyn Nine-Nine and with Cops and like before they put out their seasons. So we can say, you know, this Black character always says it's okay when racism happens. That's not real. That narrative that you're putting out needs to change so that when the culture actually comes out, it's more honest and more helpful to a racial justice movement. And so we're really using narrative strategy as a tool to restructure the way that people think and feel and understand how systemic racism causes harm to Black people. We're trying to build power, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. So narrative power is the ability to change the norms and rules that society lives by, right? We've got narrative change is like the goal. Narrative power is actually building towards that goal. It means like not only making sure your narratives are present in public discourse, but making sure that they hold weight, right? And change people's ideas. The goal is for us at Color of Change is to build power for Black people, not just to talk, right? Is like, we're not going to respond to every moment. We're going to be choosy about the places that we respond because we want to put our energy into building power, not just presence on an issue. And in fact, you know, narrative must build power for people, or it's really just not useful at all. Like if you're just talking to talk, well, like what's the point of it? You're sort of just spending time, right? Narrative has got to build power for people, and ideally build collective power, people working together, or it's really just not useful. And so to do that, you gotta look at a couple different areas. We start always with where our words have the most impact. So the location of a narrative. Is that sometimes that's on social media, sometimes it's in the news, Sometimes it's on a TV show, and sometimes it's actually in our communities. But that's where we always start. Where is our narrative going to hold the most impact? And that can change depending on who you have relationships with. If you're really embedded in the community and those folks are going to listen to you and trust you, then community organizing is where your narrative has the most impact. If you're, a big organization talking to the New York Times every few days or every week, your narratives might have the most power in like national news media. And so I think each of you can probably pinpoint where you hold power in terms of narrative. And some organizations have have power in a couple different ways. But that's the place to start. Once you're clear on that, we always think through the way we want to present our narratives. Sometimes people get tired of always finding our facts and figures. I like a good, slideshow, social media, design slideshow of like, percentages and stats. But sometimes people get tired of that, right? And so we think through like, is a data point the best way to represent our narrative? Or is it a story? Is it someone speaking? Is it sometimes it can be comedy for us. So it's like sometimes you gotta like let loose and people get tired, right? And so thinking through the clear vehicle for your narrative, how are you going to bring it to people is the sort of the next piece of that. Once you know where you're going to have impact and the vehicle you're going to use to communicate, then finally and this part takes the most time, I will say, we gotta think about how your narrative is going to drive behavior. And the way we do that is we do this exhaustive long process of looking at our narratives and having a couple different people say like, how does this drive behavior? This word, what is it going to do to people? If someone hears this in a Latino community, will they want to support the Black community? Will they feel sorry for us? If someone hears this in politics, are they going to want to pass a bill or work with us? Yeah, we spend a lot of time thinking through what behaviors our narratives are going to drive. We do this at a high level for each campaign. And then once we're done with that, then we can start running, right? It's like, I know all of you are probably moving very quickly in your work. You do this once for a big campaign, right? And then you get talking points and narrative work that you can actually disperse in a lot of different ways and quickly and more quickly. But investing the time at the onset can really make the difference between sort of people feeling sorry for a community and people feeling agency and urgency to take action around a specific target and demand. So I know all of you, I was reading through the list of the orgs that you all come from, like some incredible, really powerful organizations. And so, we always ask what's at stake for Black communities. I think you can ask the same thing for the community that you are working within and for. And so we say, now more than ever, communities of color have the opportunity to be a leader in our own stories. We don't need others telling our stories. We have access. And can demand access to the areas that stories are told. That we have that opportunity now ourselves, and so narrative is an even more powerful way for social justice movements and organizations to build your capacity and interest and dedication in the work that you want to do. When we're challenging like longstanding assumptions and social social constructs, we can create new norms, not only towards the end goal, like towards the immediate campaign goal, but we can actually create new norms and language to talk about our communities. If communities of color are being killed by a healthcare system, that's a really different narrative. Or if community colors of Black and Latino communities are saving the day during COVID, actually changes the way that people will interact with our communities down the line as well. But we have to, like I said, we got to be real careful about, using those existing, like the normal ways of speaking about things. Like I always tell my team is like, if everyone else is saying it, something's probably wrong with it. Like go find the thing that's wrong and tweak it so that it works for our communities. And with the right combination of like the research and framing, our communities can really tell better stories that move hearts and minds and drive policy and culture change. And that's the real center of the goal. And so if anyone is looking for, partners in this work, Color of Change is here to partner with you. We're, really interested in the work that you all are doing as well. I think all together, also sharing our narrative work is important for us as organizations so that we can learn from one another. And so to that end, I'm just looking for, I'm gonna pull up our chat and put a couple of links in here for you all. If anyone is looking for some of this, what I just talked about today in report format, I will put it in the chat for you. We got reports on reports on reports, and you can read our 20-page reports if you like. Listen to some of our members sort of talking about how they've shifted specific narratives. And we're down to partner. If you some of this work and continue it, definitely down to do some of these practices with you so that you can build that muscle. And thank you for having me. I hope the rest of the day is really interesting and informative and helps you, build the narratives that are going to change the world. Thanks, everyone.
Amity, thank you so much. All the finger snaps and emojis for Amity, everyone, and the beautiful work of Color of Change. Somebody had a question in the chat. They were wondering what you might suggest as the first steps or the building blocks for organizations like theirs that are primarily program focused, that have great results, that could shift narratives around assumptions regarding court-involved young people. Often other folks being served who have untrue stories told about them. But who are now looking to invest and spend more time in building up their content storytelling ability? So any recommendations for narratives regarding court-involved young people?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think court-involved young people, like the people with power, could be a couple different sets of people, right? There's the young people themselves. I think I would start with, absolutely, is like, starting with them. How do they talk about themselves? What do they want? How do they tell their own stories is really important. And then there's like the legal system itself has lots of power over them, right? And I hear, our criminal justice team does some work around this, but hear lots of stories of like abandonment and, or stories where it seems like, a child is destined for prison or destined to be in the system, right? That feels like the space to shift narrative, right? It's like, a young person that is disadvantaged is not destined, for court, right? It's actually a series of failures by adults that have caused this. And then those are behavioral changes that we can demand and make within our storytelling. And so I think thinking through those two pieces of like who your targets are and who holds power, and then also the tweaks around like, how do you make demands without blaming the children is what I would suggest.
I hope that was helpful to you, Brian. Any other questions? Awesome. As you all flow through the day, feel free to drop your questions in the chat. Amity, thank you for your valuable time. Our love to Rashad and the team. And now we're going to move on to our next presenter. I hope you all will join me in welcoming a phenomenal ally and friend within the Surdna Foundation, Elizabeth Cahill, our Director of Communications. She is our in-house narrative champion. So Elizabeth is going to tell us a little bit about what are we talking about when we say the narrative ecosystem. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Hi, everyone. Thrilled to be here and to see so many wonderful organizers on screen. So as Manuela said, I work with Manuela and Javier and at the Surdna Foundation. I want to see, can you guys see my screen right now? Something that says, what is narrative? Fabulous, great. Yeah, so over the next 3 minutes, we're going to look at what we've learned about narratives at Surdna and AFF, specifically what they are, why they matter, and take a look at the ecosystem of folks working on it. So Amity gave us such a wonderful introduction to really how you build power with narratives. We're going to take a step back and just say, what is narrative? There are two definitions that we have to work with here. The first is story, which is a telling of a particular series of events with a beginning, middle, and an end. And then narrative, a collection or system of related stories that are articulated and refined over time to represent a central idea or belief. And we took these definitions from the Narrative Initiative's New Gravity report, just echoing what Amity said. It's so important that we all kind of work from the same page on this. So moving forward, our friends at ReFrame, who are going to speak right after me, use sharks to help us understand narratives work in the world. So everybody see this here. If we take the sense of stories and sharks, first off, type in the chat, how does a shark make you feel? You feel good about sharks? Do you want to give them a hug? Yeah. They're scary, right? Shark Week, all sorts of things. So, if we look at a story, the story of Jaws is about an insatiable shark that eats people, right? That's a story, beginning, middle, and end. If we move over into narratives, which is a collection or system of related stories, that's how we end up with a bunch of narratives around how sharks are scary, that eat people, and they're dangerous predatory creatures. So the dominant narratives around sharks, these dangerous predatory creatures that in all reality kill 6 people a year. A dog is much more dangerous than a shark. A mosquito is much more dangerous than a shark, but they don't have the same bad rap that sharks do. So why are we talking about sharks, and what does this have to do with your work? Because movements are all about, as Amity said, equipping people, networks to build power, to spread ideas and change hearts and minds and behaviors. And movements for racial justice are working to overcome really deep narratives, like the shark narratives, right? We all had reactions when we saw them. We're all scared. We think they're dangerous. So trying to overcome deep narratives and shift that narrative. So when we think about the dominant narratives in the US, and let's just look at the disparate treatment of young Black people in the criminal justice system, we have to ask ourselves, what are the dominant narratives? Why are they there? What are the existing narratives that need to be dispelled? And whose stories are being told, and whose stories should be told? And when you put these questions together and you start to see who the ecosystem are of people working together to change those narratives, because narrative change really is a team sport. And it ranges from, brain science, storytelling and strategic communications, to policy and advocacy, to organizing and research, to culture change, looking at some of the film, media, artist work that both Javier and Amity held up, technology, philanthropy, and so much more. So that gives us a sense of, the narrative change ecosystem and everything that's, the players in it. And then if we look specifically at, let me see if I can change my screen here. Well, if we look specifically at examples of who's in this ecosystem, there are those who are creating new narratives, and some examples of that would be like Firelight Media, that's creating films, that's going to speak later on today, the Writers' Room and Color of Change Works. We can look at who's translating these narratives, who's taking them and making them accessible to others, such as Race Forward, another big partner in the racial justice narrative ecosystem, who's deploying these narratives, like Movement for Black Lives, Color of Change, the organizers and folks out on the ground getting these narratives out there. And then you also have folks that are bringing the players together to observe and learn together. And you'll hear from some of those folks later on today, like PopCulture Collaborative and the Narrative Initiative. So in a nutshell, that's what narratives are. And a quick look at the narrative ecosystem.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Super helpful. It's helpful to get a sense of the broad overview and what it is that we mean when we're saying certain words. And it's also really beautiful to see how, who we've learned from, right? Who are the leaders that have imparted an understanding of the world, that have imparted organizing philosophy, that have imparted a methodology for understanding narrative for movements. And so I'm smiling because my very first exposure to the shark analogy was through a presentation that Joseph and our friends at ReFrame made. And kudos to you, Joseph, because your methodology is so effective that it has shaped so many of us who are talking and seeking to understand narrative. And so shout out to your teachers, everybody in movement, because look how effective you all are at helping us understand and make sense of things. And so with that, I would love to actually introduce you to Joseph Phelan and the powerful team at ReFrame Mentorship. And they're going to help us understand a little bit more about what is strategic communications for organizing. Take it away, Joseph.
Hey y'all, how's everyone doing? I'm super psyched to be here today with this, amazing crew of folks. So I don't like to pretend like I'm in front of a classroom and you can't pass notes. The chat box is there for a reason. So I want everyone to flex your fingers, get them moving and flowing. I want to get a lot of plus ones. Let me see some plus ones in the chat box. Let me know that you are here with me. Can I see it? Anybody? Plus ones? Can you hear me? You can hear me, great. Let me see some thumbs up in the emoji land if you can see ReFrame on your screen right now. Let me see the thumbs up. Come on, find that emoji button. Okay, there we go, we got it, okay. So now I know that your fingers are working, that your chat box is working, and that your emojis are working. So for the rest of this time that I'm going to spend with you, I want the chat box flooded with questions, with plus ones when you like something, with thumbs down if you don't, with appreciations for your fellow friends, right? I'm going to be asking questions of you. I'm going to be asking for participation. Cool. So my name is Joseph Phelan. Thank you, Manuela. I'm the co-founder and executive director here at ReFrame, and we like to start all of our conversations with where we come from, because as we did, we have to name kind of that history of where we emerge from, right? Otherwise, I'd just be a random floating head in your day. So at ReFrame, we track our lineage back to folks like Jen Soriano, Makani Themba, Charlotte Ryan, and Malkia Cyril as some of the forethinkers and doers when it comes to strategic communications for narrative change, specifically focusing on racial, gender, and economic justice. So I would love, while I continue, for you to drop in the chat someone in your lineage, someone that you're bringing forward lessons from today as you go through today, someone who shaped your thinking that's going to shape how you learn today. I'm going to wait for the first, oh, there we go. Here it comes. Catch that cascade. Oh, Saun Bell. Love Saun. Okay, so a little bit more about me. I am an organizer through and through. So I got trained. Oh man, a lot of people from Silent Bell. This is great. I'm gonna shout them out. So I'm an organizer through and through. I got trained at the Miami Worker Center. And the Miami Worker Center, let me see a +1 in the chat if you've heard of the Miami Worker Center, or a +1 in the chat if you recognize anyone up on the screen. So here we have Miss Mary Wadley over on the left, and then we have Denise Perry in the middle, and Tony Romano. Right, and so this, you can tell they're the organizers because they are yelling at clearly the politicians on the left. Organizers build power, we disrupt, and then we win, right? And when we're building power, we do so in several domains. We do so in the economic, political, and what we call social or narrative domain. And so these folks here taught me most of what I will talk about today. And what I will talk about today comes out of building power. Okay, let me get a +1 if you're interested in building power. Drop a +1 in the chat, please. I'm telling you, I'm going to keep calling on you. Thank you. So, have you ever gotten a text like this before, or have you sent a text like this before? If you're an ED, guaranteed you have sent a text like this before. If you're a comms person or an organizer, guaranteed you've gotten a text like this before. Yeah. Okay, so you've gotten a text, right? And if you were like me, a young baby communications person, you generally reply to the text in the following way. Sure, boss, I'll do whatever you ask me to do, right? And at the Miami Worker Center, we were awesome at press conferences, right? We could do a press conference at 3 in the afternoon on a Thursday, and we could have 5 TV trucks out there. It was phenomenal. Right here we have Miss Mary Alice Watley right in the middle, taught me everything I know about comms. We have Ashim Benford in the background, Miss Yvonne Stratford behind her. This is at a defense for a house eviction back in Miami. So count the mics. How many mics are there? How many mics and how many languages? Drop it in the chat if you can do the math. Okay, this is again like 2, 3 in the afternoon on a Thursday, right? The middle of Liberty City, 4 mics, 2 languages minimum. Okay. So we were great at press conferences. So when we get a text, we generally would say, sure, boss. But then because we were interested in building power and we weren't going to just settle for the small bits of power that those people in power would allow us to have, is we started to ask ourselves one of the most strategic questions I ever learned to ask, and that you could probably ask yourselves, which is why? Why would we do a press conference? Right? Now, this is a duh kind of question if you've been doing strategy for quite some time, but why would we do a press conference? And it's hard to ask the question why, especially when things are going well. When things are going bad, you're generally like, well, we got to change something. It's not working out, right? But when things are going well, to ask the question why takes a bit of fortitude, right? And so we had to ask the question why, even when we were doing phenomenal press conferences and communications work here. This is Natalia Jaramillo, who now actually works for the mayor of Miami. In the background, we have Subhash Cahill, some of the best kind of immigrant organizing folks in the state of Florida at the time. Shout out to the folks from Florida in the room, right? So why became the most important question. And this became a move from a strategic approach to a tactical approach. This is about communications, but this is about organizing. This is about advocacy. This is about any kind of storytelling to narrative, okay? So people take on a tactical approach because they're looking for a magic bullet, okay? So I'm gonna see +1 in the chat. If you've ever said to someone or you've ever been told, I wanna make something go viral. Let me get a +1. +1 in the chat if anyone's ever said to you, we got to make it go viral, right? So making something go viral is a shortcut or a magic bullet in an attempt to go around other failings of the work that you might be doing. If you're not building power, I want to make it go viral, right? Like kind of like a boomer generation of making it go viral might be like, I want a front page in the New York Times, right? Because everybody reads the New York Times, right? So we look for magic bullets when we have failures in other places or weaknesses in other places, instead of doing that hard work, right? Of asking those questions of, if we use these words, what narrative or story might like they do at Color of Change, what story or narrative might it inspire, and what action will eventually take place down the line? So it takes work. But if we're only doing a tactical approach to communications, oh, I'm sorry, my slide got a little messed up here. That's okay. So if we're only doing a tactical approach to communications, we're kind of playing on this game here. So drop in the chat, what game are we looking at, folks? Come on, y'all. It takes place on a field. Soccer, uphill football, rugby, weird soccer, rugby. Right, so this is rugby. We've done this presentation, a Latin American Squid Game. Very nice, Isa. So we've done this presentation globally. Rugby is the answer, but you could pretend it's soccer. You could pretend it's American football. Whatever game is a field game. It could be lacrosse, field hockey, but a game where you're scoring on the team of opposite you. So if we're taking a tactical approach to communication, it's like passing the ball here. What team do you think we're on in this metaphor? What color are we wearing? White. I don't know, Nika, you've seen this before, I think. White. Oh, everyone who's seen this before knows what side I'm looking for. Okay, why are we on the team in white? We're in the team in white because we're playing uphill. Why are we playing uphill? What are we playing against? So we have our opposition, right? The Proud Boys are wearing red. We are wearing white. What is underneath us? What's the force? We're going uphill, but what's the force there that we're playing against? Dominant narrative. There we go, jumping the metaphor, right? Power, right? So the literal force is gravity. It's the invisible force, the invisible power that is pulling the ball against us, right? And in this metaphor, we're looking for is dominant narrative or the powerful narrative. And if we are just playing our best tactical game, right? If I was like, your goal is to win this game, I will give you all the best trainers. I will give you the best Gatorade. I will give you the best post-game massages, all of it. Would you want to play for the white team, in the team in white? Drop your answer in the chat. Do you want to play for the team in white if the goal is to win? Oh man, I can sit here all day and wait for the chat to blow up because my mom's a therapist. She taught me all about waiting and listening. No, right? We want to play for the winning team. And so if we don't want to change sides, if we want to play for the winning team, we need to flip it, right? So if we can apply strategic communications in the work we do, taking into account narrative power, then we can start to shift the field while we're also kicking the ball, okay? So this is kind of going to get a little tricky in terms of how we think about gravity and all that. So let's think about how we start to do that in our strategic communications and as we're thinking about narrative, okay? So first off, Elizabeth jumped the shark. Haha, we can talk about sharks all day, right? So fact, sharks kill 10 people a year, right? But yet again, if we throw this image up here in the chat, you're still going to be scared, even if you're holding that fact, right? And you're going to be scared because of powerful stories. So Elizabeth mentioned Jaws, but Jaws, and as the definition goes, is a telling of a particular series of events, the beginning and a middle and end. Got you. We got 5 minutes. I'm going to go fast. So, and a narrative is a collection or system of related stories, right? So Jaws is one story, narrative is many stories refined over time, right? And so when we think about the story of sharks and Jaws, we actually have plenty of stories over and over. And this is why it's really important not to misconstrue story with narrative, because the narrative that Elizabeth exposed us to, which is Jaws are coming for you, they are the monsters, that narrative stays the same, but the stories, the detail, the emotional content of those stories changes over and over, okay? So what tiles are the mosaics, stories are the narratives, the relationships are symbiotic. And so if we do tactical communications, we stay playing on this field. And so if we do strategic communications, we can start to shift the field. So what is strategic communications becomes the question. So strategic communications is consistently and persistently saying the right thing to the right people at the right time to mobilize social power, advance your narrative, so you can accomplish short-term objectives and set up long-term victories. Cool. Let me see a +1 if you've heard this definition before in the chat. No? Oh, cool. First time. Isa, you've heard it before. I appreciate that. Thank you. Isabel and I used to work together in Florida on many different things. So I'm glad that some things have carried forward. So what do we do now that we have this definition, right? What do we do now that we know that we have to consistently, persistently say the right thing to the right people at the right time to mobilize social power and advance narratives? So as people moving communications, and as I think as Elizabeth pointed out, we have to remember that we can move narratives and stories, regardless of the work we're doing. Is it communications? Is it organizing? Is it advocacy? Is it legislative work? Is it legal advocacy? Is it lawsuits, right? We can move them everywhere we do, but there's some things that we need to do together. So one is we can't forget Jaws. How could you? It's terrifying. But you can't forget Jaws, because Jaws, we have to bring a story-based approach to our work, okay? Facts are not the primary currency of meaning. I'm going to say this again. Facts are not the primary currency of meaning. Stories are. So as of who we are, we care about the truth and we care about facts, and we have to deal with the really hard reality that they are not the primary mover of emotions. They're not the primary instigators of activity. It's the meaning that can be made through stories. So we have to remember to bring stories into the work that we do. We have to remember to squad up, okay? You can't go it alone, right? If someone says to you, well, how are you moving the narrative? You say, I'm not moving the narrative. We are moving the narrative, okay? So in this picture here, this is from a ReFrame convening, but clearly pre-COVID. And here we have Chelsea Fuller, who is a big mover and shaker in the Me Too work. We have Chanel Matthews front and center, who is the comms director at Movement for Black Lives. We have Sam Robles, who's a powerful communication strategist in Texas, working on issues of economic justice and migrant rights. These folks work together through ReFrame, but they also work together out in a movement ecosystem. You have to work together to move stories. Remember that slide of all of those shark stories that led to the meaning of sharks being harmful? You need to squad up and you need to move in coordination. And we have to remember that coordination and collaboration takes resources, time, and energy, right? It's not just something that you do on the side at the end of the day. I got my 1 minute, I'm gonna make this 1 minute, I got you. So we got to remember that, okay? Advocate with the people who give you resources to bring in resources for coordination. Next, you have to know which way the wind blows, okay? I am based in Woodstock, New York. I do have to quote Bob, as they call him up here. So you have to know which way the wind blows. You have to know the narrative weather. We have to know what is a dominant conversation at any given moment so we can know how to move within that dominant conversation. There are plenty of places doing a lot of research out there. Here at ReFrame, we have a project called Signals in the Noise, where we're able to produce daily insights into what is the current narrative weather, regardless of issue, regardless of geography. Get down with an organization that is doing the research work so you know what you're actually engaged with. It is the age of filter bubbles, and if you don't have the right information, you're going to be responding to the wrong, you're going to be responding and moving in environments that are not necessarily real for the people you're trying to move with, okay? And lastly, get ready to move when opportunity presents itself. At ReFrame, we've been engaged in building power and social change work for decades, our crew, and we've seen that social change and power building does not happen in a linear fashion. It happens in fits and starts, and it is up to us to take advantage of a rising opportunity to jump forward powerful narratives through stories that we've been incubating for years. So get your story, get trained, get ready to move on all the stories, align yourself with your crew, understand the weather, and take advantage of arising opportunities, okay? So those are the 4 lessons I'm gonna leave you with today when we're thinking about how to apply this. And then finally, I know that you're gonna have a tremendous amount of phenomenal speakers today. They are really, really, really great. I wanna remind you something that Elizabeth really touched on is it can be easy to get overwhelmed in these conversations because you may think, oh shoot, I have to learn some completely new thing. I have to learn how to do this thing that my organization is not set up to do. But the reality is you can advance narratives in the work that you are doing by making those small changes, identifying those narratives, moving those stories, squatting up and taking advantage of opportunities. That is my time. And it has been wonderful to be here with you all. I'm excited to see what happens with the rest of the day.
Thank you so much, Joseph. Shout out to Joseph, everyone. Those of you who are AFF movement partners know that Joseph on an annual basis offers a training for those who are looking to begin their first steps into narrative. And so we've been fortunate to partner with Joseph for the past couple of years. And now the Surdna Foundation is offering the same training to our movement partners. So please be on the lookout folks to continue deepening our partnership with ReFrame. We are now going to move into a sharing of our movement partners. So all of you are already engaging in narrative change, narrative work. So as a reminder, we will be entering into breakout groups. The next series of presentations will be by 3 movement partners. So Saida, if you would like to go into the next slide. In the main room, we're going to have our friends from Youth First Initiative, Liz Ryan and Mark Rehnquist from Performing Statistics, and they're going to talk about the No Kids in Prison experience and how they've used that exhibit and virtual reality experience to disrupt narratives around incarceration and try to close youth prisons. Our friends at Soul Sisters Leadership Collective are going to talk about how the young women and gender nonconforming girls in Florida and New York are using narratives to promote restorative justice, healing, and liberation, and particularly with a focus on radical artistry, as they call it. And then in the third room, we're going to have our respected leader, Danielle Surratt from Common Justice. And Danielle is going to talk a little bit about what are the major narrative shifts that our movement has to make to embrace an end to mass criminalization. And her unique lane is how do we talk about narratives that address violent crimes and what we all need to do to embrace the shift that we're looking for. So we are a couple of minutes behind schedule. Please know the presenters have exactly 5 minutes and they're just going to share, take notes, drop questions in the chat, and then we will be back in exactly 5 minutes. So actually we're ahead of time. So let's go and give everybody 8 minutes. All right, beautiful. So room 1, how do you get to your room? So you all should be able to go to breakout rooms in the bottom of your screen. As you can see, next to the number that you're interested in, you'll be able to hover over that number. Next to room 1, there's numbers popping up. So go forth, everyone. Liz and Mark are here in this main room. Room 2, again, is Soul. Room 3 is Common Justice. I'm sorry, Saida, go ahead. Okay, great. See you at 2:10.
Liz, I'm not hearing you.
Can you hear me now? Okay, so should I just go ahead and do the quick intro? Hi, everybody. I'm Liz Ryan with the Youth First Initiative. We're working to end youth incarceration and shift resources away from incarcerating youth to serving young people in their communities. And we do this by supporting campaigns in 15 states, centering directly impacted young people, doing the work through an organizing approach and through a racial justice lens. And so we do a lot of strategic communications work and a lot of narrative change work in collaboration with many partners. And one of our key partners are Performing Statistics. I want to introduce my good friend and colleague, Mark Strandquist.
Thank you so much, Liz. Can folks hear me okay? Yeah, it's like such an incredible honor to join. My name is Mark Strandquist, he, him. I live in Philly, but I work in collaboration with Youth First and a bunch of abolitionist organizers around the country. I'm going to share some slides because the work we do is much more interesting than the office that I'm currently in. So I'm going to share real quick and make sure folks can see things okay. Can folks see this okay? Okay, cool. So what is performance statistics and how do we get to the No Kids in Prison digital experience? So for us, we've been doing work with young folks, youth leaders around the country for over 8 years now. And the entire point of our project is to look to young folks directly impacted by the system as leaders, as policy experts, and to use art to amplify their voices, dreams, and demands for a world where all youth are free. We do that in a ton of different ways. Pre-pandemic, we designed interactive installations that use virtual reality, filmmaking, hip hop videos, murals. We are agnostic of our medium. We just want to use art to reach the broad and strategic audiences. So this is an installation we just did in City Hall, where the mayor in Richmond, Virginia works every day. This is Tadrima and Clyde, two youth organizers at Rise for Youth, which is a Youth First supported campaign. This is an interactive installation where art and story, organizing, and technology are all being combined. So when you hold your phone up to these youth, amazing youth, monumental youth portraits, Tadrima and Clyde actually come alive. And I can show you real quick what that looks like. It just looks amazing. And just a good example of like, you know, if we want to sort of ensure that youth voices are being heard, how do we bring them directly to people that, you know, make decisions about the budgets and the laws and the policies that affect youth, young folks' lives every day. So when you're holding your phone in front of their portraits, the city, the clouds above City Hall literally come alive with these abolitionist dreams. And you can hear.
I see communities thriving, outreach available, happiness, positivity. Children being healed instead of hurt. Families growing together instead of being torn apart.
It's an amazing experience. If you can come to Richmond, please sneak by. We actually just installed the city's first ever interactive bus. And so all of these were sort of like pre-pandemic examples of like, how do we sort of take over public space that have been strategically silencing young folks' voices, and worked with Youth First and Columbia Justice Lab to create a one-of-a-kind digital immersive experience where you can literally step into the everyday realities of youth incarceration and how it affects young folks, how it affects their families, as well as end in a beautiful future where all youth are free. And a couple like things I want to just sort of like leave you with as we kind of wrap up is that the beauty of these digital and public art experiences is they're accessible. They are not fixed in one location. You know, so often if young folks are going to share their voices with us, it's so essential that we have a responsibility to make sure that the right people are hearing these stories. Digital experiences also provide organizers all over the country with tools that can exist where you yourself do not have to be like managing and facilitating those experiences. You can share them with tons of organizers and advocates. It also means that like young folks who are often in movements asked to retell really difficult and often traumatic experiences don't have to do that over and over and over again. We don't focus on that. We're not about extracting trauma and sharing it with other folks. It's about dreaming of a better world where all youth are free. But the beauty of a digital experience like this is that it allows for these stories to be well produced and they don't have to be regurgitated over and over again. So one key thing is that if you make a really beautiful immersive experience and nobody sees it, it's not really worth it. So partnership is everything. So working with amazing advocates and organizers around the country to make sure that this digital tool and these public art projects are embedded in their everyday abolitionist work. So I think I'm at time, so I'm going to stop there. But thank you so much for having us, and such an honor to do this work alongside you, Liz.
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone. I hope that little appetizer around the beautiful work that our partners are doing was enough to pique your interest. It is unreal and absolutely unfair to start the conversation with only 5 minutes, but we only are organizing in this way, Mark, I'm so sorry, to get people to like know how amazing and what it is that you're moving, and then get them to come and connect with you. And so again, also our apologies for misspelling your name on the slides. It's Strandquist. So thank you everybody for your grace. We're gonna move into the next part of our presentations. And this is an exploration by movement strategist / resource organizers. And so we will have in the main room here, if Saida, you could pop up the slide for folks to see. In room 1, we have Tracy Slyke, a presenter with the PopCulture Collaborative, and she's going to talk about the superpower of pop culture. In room 2, we have Fabiana Rodriguez from the Center for Cultural Power and the Constellations Fund, and she's going to talk about artists, cultural workers, and lessons learned. And then in room 3, we're going to have Vanessa Camarena Redondo from Antonetty Foundation in Oakland, who will talk about the role of culture and arts and movement building. So see you in the Zoom streets, and we will be back by 2:10. Yeah, Shaquana, you can go to room 3. Let me know if you know how to join the breakout rooms. You just go to the bottom of the screen where it says breakout rooms. Okay, so Saida can help pop in instructions, but I'll just share them really quickly. You go down to where it says breakout room and then flow over the room. And next to where the blue numbers are, where the number is changing and it shows how many people are joining, when you hover over that number, a join button will pop up. Oh, you're getting an empty pop-up. Okay. All right. So Ellie, let us know what room you want to go to, and Saida will try to send you there.
One quick note, it's the breakout rooms, they're labeled room 1 and room 2. So for folks who want to go to room 3, choose room 2. And for folks who want to go to room 2, choose room 1. And the main, if you want to remain here, this is the main room.
Hi, this is Tracy. Is this the main room for me? It wasn't.
Yes, it is.
Okay, great. Do you want me to get started then?
Sure.
Great. I can do that.
Hi, really quick, Saida, Vanessa, and Fabiana in the same room.
You want me to go, this is Vanessa, to room 1, or because Fabiana is getting started, this is Vanessa.
You should go to room 2.
I'll go to room 2? Okay.
Yeah.
I'll Fabiana to move to room 1.
I can move her.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Apologies.
Should I get started? Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Tracy Slyke with the PopCulture Collaborative. The PopCulture Collaborative is a multi-million-dollar donor collaborative working to transform the narrative landscape in America around people of color, immigrants and refugees, Muslims and Indigenous peoples, particularly those who are women, queer, transgender, and disabled. Before the collaborative launched almost 5 years ago, I had spent almost 2 decades playing multiple roles within the narrative change field as a journalist and magazine publisher, as a strategic communications director for a national grassroots organization, and as a narrative infrastructure designer leading a network of progressive media outlets to realign themselves and work together. So it was about 10 years ago that I had an aha moment that made me start a whole new narrative change path. I was working with a national organizing campaign focused on transforming the narrative around the economy. Who crashed it? Who should the economy work for? But as we went deeper and deeper into the work, I realized we were misaligning our narrative approach with our ultimate narrative vision. Yes, we were fighting for people's immediate rights and restitutions, campaigning for a national policy we wanted to win. Every day we were focused on impacting the headlines, the poll numbers, the daily actions people took. And we were actually very successful in winning a national policy because this narrative approach and the aligned organizing work actually was successful. But we also wanted people to imagine, to yearn for, and demand new economic systems and structures. And that narrative vision and narrative approach we were employing did not match up. That space of yearning, of imagination, translating to demand and widespread systemic change, actually sat in the narrative approach of culture change. Culture, where people's passions lie, where their imaginations are sparked, where their beliefs are formed, and where their behaviors are shaped. So this brings me to my first foundational takeaway. And if there's a pop quiz at the end of this session, this is where you want to start taking notes. So People have started dropping the word narrative everywhere over and over again. Y'all might be sick of the word narrative at this point. However, we are using narrative and narrative change as an all-encompassing idea, conflating or confusing specific narrative approaches. Narrative change is actually a big umbrella strategy with multiple distinct approaches that make up this work. At the highest level, there are 3 distinct narrative approaches: strategic communications, journalism and opinion, and culture change. All help millions of people make meaning of the stories and narratives they are immersed in every day. Each of these narratives have their own distinct methodologies and expertise, impact, timelines, and needed narrative infrastructure. For example, strategic communications most often sits in the timeline of working in the short and medium term, directly impacting opinions and the actions people can take within that timeline, such as the need to participate in democracy through a rally or at a voting booth. Strategic communications is also what we most often employ to inform and impact journalism. These are the 2 most dominant narrative approaches we most routinely invest in as a social change field. Culture change, we don't as much, but that moves at the medium and long term, working to shape people's fundamental beliefs and behaviors, such as who belongs in this country and how we treat each other. Many times our narrative approaches can cross, like the Ghostbusters crossing their streams at a critical moment to take down the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. I might be the only one old enough to know that reference, but they can work together to reinforce each other. But they both, like I said, all have distinct purposes and needs. So it's important to ask, what narrative approach are you currently using and why? And which narrative approach or approaches are needed to achieve the shared vision of you and your peers? So at the PopCulture Collaborative, we're working with the narrative approach of culture change to create profound shifts in how people think, feel, and behave in the world. And specifically, we focus on pop culture because that is one of the most influential arenas in which people make meaning in the world. The big ideas, the immersive stories that flow through television, movies, social media, music, books, sports, journalism, and more. Which takes me to my second major takeaway today. Long-term narrative change is not accomplished by one creative, one organization, or one person. Culture change requires us to work in radical coordination at scale towards a shared vision. At the Collaborative, we have 2 areas in which we support the pop culture for social change field to do their work: narrative infrastructure and narrative immersion. Via infrastructure, we are supporting the innovative models, the research, the people, the tools, the partnership that together operate and fuel narrative strategies. We support field members to work in radical coordination within and across industries so that they have the relationships and partnerships to move powerful pop culture level narrative campaigns together. We support groups like Storyline Partners, which is a network of National Domestic Workers Alliance, Define American, Illuminative, Moms Rising, and over a dozen more, who all individually work with different television writers' rooms to impact storylines. But together as Storyline Partners, they're joining forces so they can work together across dozens and dozens and dozens of writers' rooms and at the policy level with studios and networks. We support BIPOC artists to build new infrastructure incubators, pipelines, television writers' room models to recenter who has narrative power inside the entertainment industry. And together we are supporting our field to operate at scale, routinely being able to reach more than 1 million people every day. For narrative immersion, I just want to note that I'm calling in my colleague Bridget Antoinette Evans, as she is behind much of the articulation of the following theory and strategy. So I want you to hold this image in your head. The idea of a narrative ocean, the stories, the behaviors, the norms, the ideas that swirl around us every day and make meaning. I don't think anyone here would argue that some of those narrative oceans that we're swimming in every day are toxic, and some are even killing some of us. So we support the pop culture for social change field to change the composition of the narrative oceans we are swimming in, so that the ideas and the norms that millions of people are engaging with every day are just and pluralist. We do that through a process, a theory that we call narrative systems. We studied a lot of culture change processes, and we have come to believe that the intentional design and activation of narrative systems accelerate the pace of culture change. A coordinated system, a narrative system is a coordinated system of mental models, narrative archetypes, behaviors, and stories designed to shift how people think and feel and behave in the world. So imagine that we have a foundational idea about how we believe the world should operate and associated behaviors. That idea starts to be part of the films and television and music and fashion and social media that are creating a surround sound experience for all of us. A narrative system is activated by a narrative network, a coordinated cross-sector group of practitioners that include artists and organizers and journalists and public figures and community leaders aligned around a shared culture change goal and strategy. And what you see here is the beginnings of the narrative network the collaborative has been resourcing and organizing to work together. We're prototyping a narrative system and narrative network approach through our Becoming America Fund, which I encourage you to look up on our website. In 2020 and early 2021, we supported a narrative network in more than 50 projects that collectively reached over 100 million people, actively working to begin to immerse millions of Americans in a vibrant pop culture driven narrative ocean that is igniting public imagination about our pluralist future. So just to end, what I would say in summation or questions to take away is, what is your narrative change goal? What is the narrative change approach best suited to that goal? Is it strategic communications and work in journalism, or culture change, or a combination? What narrative infrastructure associated with that goal and that approach are you going to need? And what is the narrative system that you're going to design to immerse millions of Americans in the world and society that you want to build? Thanks. Any questions?
Okay. You can feel free to come off mute and ask your question, or if you want to drop the question in the chat.
Great. I think I'm probably done early.
One second, I'm just troubleshooting some things here.
My Wi-Fi is being wonky. I'm going to be, oh, sorry, I can't.
So we have a question from Liz. She asked, can you talk about how you would envision working with campaigns?
We do work with a lot of campaigns. We do a lot of grant making towards movement groups that are sort of early adopters or path breaking in terms of aligning and integrating sort of culture change campaigns into their issues and their into their organizations. So we, for example, fund the National Domestic Workers Alliance, who for years has been aligned with their organizing work, aligned with their communications and policy work, have been doing deep work to actually create a narrative strategy around the role of caregivers and caregiving in this country. So they have deeply established partnerships with different artists inside the entertainment industry, worked on sort of creating new kinds of immersive content across comedy and across fiction and nonfiction, documentaries, books, and more, starting to create this, once again, this immersive experience around a surround sound experience around narrative and around caregiving and caregivers, trying to move them from sort of the uninvisibilized to the center of understanding how we care for each other and the kind of support those caregivers need. And that culture change work, that strategy, which has been central to their overarching campaign has led now to this moment where care is a deep, deep part of the whole infrastructure bill that is being debated right now in front of Congress. We've worked with other groups like Color of Change, who have sort of reimagined and realigned how they work with entertainment to sort of build narrative power for Black-led artists and creatives, and are starting to imagine and create a whole new narrative ocean around reimagining policing as well. So those are just some examples of groups that we work with and we support through our grant making.
Okay, any other questions?
Great. Well, I will mute myself and stop video so you all can gather back together. Unless there are other questions. Oh, suggestions for groups that don't have access to that kind of scale. Sorry, I did not see that. So I would say a couple of things is one, it's starting to think about, starting to push your idea of what you think scale it can be, right? Like it's not that every group needs to be working at a national mass audience scale. Absolutely not. That is not a condition that I think anyone should be put under. It should be really matched up with the kind of strategy and capacity that your organization has. But you can start to think about scale more than the tens, the hundreds, the thousands, right? You can start to also think about scale, not even as what Joseph was saying and what I was trying to reiterate here is that scale isn't just achieved on your own. It's starting to figure out what's the narrative network that you are a part of that starts to build the kind of reach and kind of immersion that you can create as a coordinated network. So that is the way you start to think about your work. It doesn't always have to be at the 1 million person level. It can be at a very targeted audience level, at a level of immersion for that very particular audience, whether it's geographic or demographic or ideas or passion focus. We focus a lot on pop culture fandoms, for example. And so how do you create that narrative immersion for that particular audience with the groups that you were working in radical coordination with?
Okay, we'll begin to call folks back in from the breakout rooms.
Hey, Sarah, can you see me and hear me?
Hi, Rinku.
Hi. Am I getting moved into my breakout room by somebody else?
Hey, we can send you there now, Rinku. So everybody, welcome again. If you're just popping in, we're so happy that you were able to join us. We're at 2:30 now in our agenda. We will reshare the agenda into the chat for those new folks who are just joining us. Thank you to Fabiana, Tracy, Vanessa for your presentations and your grace for that little glitch around what room to go to. Moving forward, we're fine. So at this segment, we're going to talk about narrative producers and content creators. So Saida will share on the screen the presentation. So in the main room, we'll have Marcia Smith from Firelight Media, and in breakout room 2, we'll have Rinku Sen from the Narrative Initiative. So feel free to join room 2 with Rinku now, everybody. And if you want to hear from Marcia and impact producers and documentary filmmakers, stay here. And without further ado, we will begin with Marcia in this room.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Okay, so wave at me so I know you can hear me, see me, etc. Great, thank you very much. Hi, a lot of old friends, few new friends. Nice to see you all. I know we don't have much time. I want to do a couple of things here today. I want to give you a quick overview of Firelight Media, what we do. I want to give you a couple of the questions that we use to kind of guide our decisions. And I want to show you a couple of trailers that will be examples of what I'm talking about. Firelight is 20 years old, actually 21 years old this month. We started as a way to build some infrastructure around documentary filmmaking, which, as you surely know, was very unstable financially. We have changed and grown in that time. And we do three principal things now. One is we do our own documentary production. Two is, and we spend a lot of our efforts supporting BIPOC documentary producers, directors at all stages of the pipeline through a number and growing number of programmatic efforts. And three, we encourage and build what is known in our field as impact campaigns. That is materials, platforms, relationships to extend the content of documentary films and see that the content is used, particularly by community organizers, but so that we want to kind of extend the narrative shifts that we believe can begin to happen when people see documentary films. Those are the three basic things we do. We do docs because for a lot of reasons, as you all also know, because everybody has Netflix and Hulu and Amazon now, the field has drastically changed from what it was 20 years ago. The work that we used to do when we started could pretty much only be found on PBS. That is no longer the case. If you look at all of the genres across entertainment, documentary is the fastest growing. Both because they are appealing to people, but also because from a distributor or a company's, commercial company's point of view, they are cheap, which is not insignificant. People talk now about this being a quote golden age of documentary. I heard on a podcast recently it's better described as a gold rush because actually the commercial framing of documentaries and the commercial appetite for documentaries has some seriously negative effects on the field that include ethical considerations in documentaries and also truthfulness. There was one survey I read recently that said that people by a significant margin trust documentary films as a source of truth more than they do news, which is, I think, interesting. I think also in the culture realm, a lot of times when people talk about culture, they don't consider documentaries. We very much consider documentary film to be part of culture, and in some cases, and sometimes can actually lead popular culture. Just to give a couple examples, I think if you look at the types of films like Judas and the Black Messiah or the Chicago 7 from last year. If you look back a few years before that, you'll see documentary films that actually began to reframe how people talked about the Black Panther Party, for example, and then, inspired people who are working in a different realm to kind of take up and reconsider those issues. Here, I just want to offer some of the questions that we talk about a lot, that we kind of propagate conversation on in our field. One, and we've been talking about these things today all day, because I've been listening all afternoon. One is whose stories are told and whose are not. That's one, any organizer will recognize. The story of the police officer is told. The story of the kid who is stopped and searched 20 times in a year is not. Two is who's telling the story, which in our view makes a huge difference in many, many ways. We exist in large part to help BIPOC makers and communities to tell their own stories. And in so doing, we believe the stories are better, they're truer, they make a bigger contribution. And the third question is, who are they telling them to? And this is not as evident, I think, as the first two. We have been involved in a lot of discussions over the last 10 years about preaching to the choir, the importance of reaching beyond the choir. We actually came down to believe that we actually have to preach to the choir, quote unquote. So that a lot of our work is aimed at building audiences among BIPOC communities. Because we believe that documentary film can play an important role in building solidarity among BIPOC communities and in strengthening those communities to both see themselves in each other and form alliances, and also to educate people. If we look at what's happening in the education system right now, if a lot of the work that we produce is related to history, and so we believe that films play an important role in educating BIPOC communities on history, everybody, but principally and firstly, I would say BIPOC communities on history and truth. So let me see if I can share my screen. I want to show you two trailers. One is a new film of ours directed by my partner on Attica. This is the 50th anniversary of the Attica uprising, which is the largest prison rebellion in the history of the United States. And the second, I'm going to just play them sequentially, is a film that was developed in our documentary lab. It's a first-time documentary filmmaker. The film is called Neutral Ground, and it's about the process of challenging Confederate monuments. So I'm going to just play those, and if we have any more time, I'll come back. Wish me luck sharing my screen. Not the screen you want to see, I know. Is that working? Okay.
Attica was fear. It was 70% black and brown. Prisoners, all white guards. What could go wrong? Grab the guards, grab the keys. All hell don't push. Are these primarily blacks? Guys were complaining about the basic things like toothpaste. A roll of toilet paper would last you a month. The inmates were considered like animals. They get you up in your cell and they take you to segregation, and sometimes you don't come back. Have the inmates made any demands? There are all kinds of demands for change in the whole world.
This had to be mediated, otherwise it was going to end in disaster. They wanted to use those weapons.
Put your hands in the air and you will not be harmed. You will not be harmed. You will not be harmed. But that was bullshit. We are men. He was waking up America. Somebody had to take a stand.
Okay. How much time we have? Anybody know?
You have about 4 minutes.
Okay, I'm gonna do it then. Hold on.
It is
sorry.
amazing in 2015, I'm fighting Robert E. Lee. This is
All right.
It is amazing in 2015, I'm fighting Robert E. Lee. This is, it's almost hilarious. Those statues that should have been erected, the South lost.
Let's take down these statutes and put them in a place of proper remembrance, not reverence.
4 monuments to the Confederacy are set to come down in New Orleans.
The vote is considered one of the most sweeping moves by a U.S. city to cut ties with Confederate history.
But that's not what happened.
That's not what happened.
Backlash over a plan to remove these prominent monuments has led to death threats, intimidation, and even the intentional torching of a contractor's Lamborghini.
We're live out here at the Jeff Davis Monument. It is extremely chaotic right now.
We cannot have reconciliation without truth.
Okay. Here we go. This, for me, is the closest we can get to the actual Confederacy.
Somebody is going to abuse the institution.
People don't always take care of their objects well.
Right.
Including when that object is a person.
Including when it's a person.
We have intentionally misrepresented this history to our own citizens on purpose.
These people who are really bigoted, I bet we could just change their minds.
Why do you think that?
I don't know, because
Why do you hold that hope out, that illusion?
These stories are coming out. So I think we're in a different point in the time that these things are not going to be swept under the rug any longer.
Okay, I'm stopping there. That's all I got.
Mississippi, of course, was a real storm center.
We can take questions for a minute if anybody has anything.
We got 1 minute. Somebody asked, the second consideration was who's telling the story? Because who tells the story makes a difference. Anybody? Well, hope you get to see both of those films. Neutral Ground is streaming on pbs.org. Attica will be on Showtime starting November 6th. All right, Karina, what's the question? Just unmute yourself if you have questions, be faster.
Okay, thank you. Can you repeat the 3 questions that you?
Oh, the first was whose stories get told and whose do not. The second is who is telling the story, and the third is who are they telling the story to?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Marcia and Firelight team, for your beautiful, powerful, succinct presentation, everybody. Shout out to you for your grace. I told everybody, you know, today will feel a little bit like you're on ice skates. But we're grateful for your grace as we move through it. So thank you, Marcia and everyone. I think everyone should have returned from Rinku's session where we talked about which narratives are poised for building power. And Rinku helped us understand what's the what here, right? So now we're going to move into presentations by some of our movement partners. So in the main room, we're going to have Sacha Antonetty from Colectivo and from Revista Etnica. And la sesión en este main room será en español. This main room session will be in Spanish. And then in room 2, we're going to have our friends from Padres y Jóvenes Unidos talking about TikTok and building youth power. So we'll see you in the rooms, everyone.
Sacha, when you're ready, you can, oh, there you go.
Hi, saludos. Are you seeing the screen sharing? Perfect. Mi nombre es Sacha Antonetty, fundadora de Revista Étnica y organizadora de Colectivo. Soy escritora y comunicadora, así que lo que más fácil me sale es contar historias y crear historias, así que aquí les compartiré un poco de poesía de lo que pasó con Afrojuventudes, un programa que tuvimos con 50 jóvenes de todo el archipiélago de nuestras islas, desde Vieques a Mayagüez, un sueño colectivo de ILE, una escuela antirracista, un sueño de continuidad de revistas étnicas para seguir trabajando desde el arte, desde la comunicación, desde el activismo, arte, activismo, desde la palabra, desde la imagen, desde el sonido y desde nuestras músicas negras. Un sueño en poesía, en trap, en bomba, en reggaetón y en hip hop. Un sueño hecho realidad. ¿Qué esperan de este espacio? Le preguntamos a los jóvenes. Afrosanación. Y con esta palabra compuesta se iluminaron las caras negras, negrísimas. Desde Zoom, desde una dimensión nueva, 8 meses todos los sábados, dándonos tiempo a nuestro ritmo, ganando. Un intervalo de duelos pandémicos, post-huracanes y terremotos que han visitado esta colonia a Puerto Rico para ponernos el racismo, la pobreza, la misoginia negra y el patriarcado de frente, en la cara. Nos pusimos nuestras coronas y fuimos libres. Tengo el poder de contar mi verdad. Tengo el poder de contar mi verdad, dijo Coco un día. Desarrollamos contranarrativas desde adentro, desde el ser. Nos vimos en el espejo, escribimos y lloramos al ver tanta belleza de sabernos reinas y reyes. En un reino que te dice desde la publicidad, desde reglamentos y los libros de historia, todo lo contrario. ¿Qué tienes? Dice el pelo malo. Malo no, afroúnico, fue su respuesta. Y querer volver a Nigeria, como dijo Xochitl, a trenzar algún día a su abuela africana, el sueño, regresar y mientras tocar y aprender desde telas africanas, desde turbantes, viajar, una afrotravesía desde patrones, colores e historias que nos conectan al pasado, que nos conectan con nuestro afrofuturo. Luchar para que se eliminen reglamentos que nos penalizan por nuestro cabello natural, el Crown Act, desde Boriquén. Lograr que se pase una ley para nombrar la única carretera de Loíza con el nombre de nuestra ancestra, Adolfina Villanueva, mujer negra en el 1980, asesinado por la policía. No olvidarla. Angry Black People, violenta no, apasionada. Soy negra sin disculpas, sin pedir perdón. Black is beautiful, cafre, no. Es que lo doy todo, bebé, decían nuestros jóvenes. Tomo el espacio del que te apropia, el que nos toca y nos merecemos desde nuestra realidad. Soy yal de corazón y tienen que aguantar presión, dijo Carla, un día adueñándose del mic. Nos hipersexualizan, pero nos adueñamos. Reclamamos, respeta mi espacio, respeta mi piel. Merezco amor sano y la autogestionan, así como gestionaron un festival de cierre, el sueño de Cahill, de todes, de poder bailar juntos, leernos, rapear, ser dueños de la tarima, abrazarnos, vivir desde la alegría en nuestra afrojayaera, el swag, nuestro Black Girl Magic, nuestro afrobichotismo con el brilloteo, todo el glitter y entrar y estar siempre, como dijo Gaby, con la frente en alto. Este fue, ¿verdad? Un poco de lo que compartimos. Quisiera compartir con ustedes un video. Vamos a ver, yo no veo mi pantalla. Vamos a ver si lo puedo lograr.
Thank you, everybody, and welcome back. Sacha, disculpa, no sé si ya ibas a
Sí, cerrar.
Ok, disculpa.
Les compartimos el video luego.
Okay, we'll drop it in the chat, the video that Sacha was just about to share. Thank you, Padres y Jóvenes Unidos, for showing your brilliance on TikTok and how you use it to educate and recruit new members. And then Sacha for your powerful work here with Colectivo and Revista Etnica, and also centering Black folks in Puerto Rico as obviously we know that that's there, but not everybody was hip to that. So Sacha's work on culture and media has been instrumental in that. And so now we want to welcome our next set of presenters. So Saida will throw on the slide so you all know where you're headed. But for here, we're talking about narrative change makers, both for Black power and Indigenous power, right? And so in this main room, we're gonna have Crystal Echohawk from Illuminative, amplifying narratives centering Native communities. And in room 2, we're gonna have Alicia Garza from Black Futures Lab around a Black-led agenda for political power, her podcast, Lady Don't Take No, and other really amazing narrative change work. So let's get to it. And Crystal, you can feel free to begin.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good, because it's really choppy on my end. Thank you so much for having me today. And I guess I just want to open up and just, I guess kind of keep it real and honest with everyone. I've had a death in my family. So I'm not at my best today, but it was my niece, she was 15, and I normally probably would have scheduled not to be here today, but so much of the work that we do is for our young people. So I'm just going to try to share a little bit over the next few minutes because it's just really honoring her and her dad and our family. Hopefully it'll make sense because this work is so important. And again, I'm just really honored to be invited into this circle, and along with Alicia Garza, who is just a shero, and just follow her work. And she's inspired so much of our work at Illuminative. So I guess I'll just kind of jump in and just, share a couple of things over the next few minutes. My name is Crystal Echohawk. I'm a citizen of the Pawnee Nation, which our reservation is located in Oklahoma. And I'm coming to you today from the lands of the Muskogee Creek Nation, which is also known as Tulsa, Oklahoma, and also sitting on the lands of exactly where the Tulsa Race Massacre is. So I'm just really honoring these things today and calling that energy into this circle as we engage in this really important discussion. And, I'm founder and executive director of Illuminative, and our mission is really to build power for Native peoples by, combating erasure and systemic racism and white supremacy, and doing so by really, working to amplify the contemporary voices and stories and issues of Native peoples, and to really build power through representation in that way. And so we use narrative and cultural strategy as kind of our core tactics, along with organizing as well. And so, was just really asked today to share a little bit about, how, about what it takes to do narrative change, to advance narrative change within Indigenous communities, and how that's imperative. And I think the one thing I guess I want to call in and center today is, I don't know how many of you saw sort of the horrific news report that came out of Fox News last Thursday, in which 3 different Fox News commentators, including Jesse Waters, and a former member of the GOP from Wisconsin, and his wife, all commentators on Fox News, really went into this kind of 10-minute diatribe against Native Americans, really blaming us, for all kinds of things, and talking about how we receive slush funds from the federal government, that we are just, alcoholics, and, anything that's going wrong with Native peoples is due to our alcoholism, and due to, essentially, I don't know how many different times throughout the course of the segment, which they call the savages. And really just, it was a way, as you look through the commentary, to really rationalize genocide in this country, and the theft of Native lands, and to kind of sweep it under the rug, and by calling us savages, and that we were more savage than anyone else, and talking a lot about how, Christopher Columbus was the first victim of cancel culture. It was like all the great things that Fox News does, right, to kind of feed its base, that kind of red meat. But I really encourage you to go to Illuminative social media. You know, you can find us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, but you can watch the segment. And I think just one, it's horrific. I mean, one, it's Fox News, right? But how long do we continue to kind of really stand by and just kind of excuse it because it's Fox News, right? That we kind of just ignore it and brush it aside. It was so egregious. And I have a feeling that if this was about almost any other community, there would be more outrage. And I think that's the first thing, right? Is that really we are dealing more so than ever in dealing, you know, looking straight into the eyes of white supremacy and the impacts of systemic racism. And if we do not stand up together and stand up against all forms of this, no matter what community it's impacting, then we have a real problem, right? And I think that's the first thing is, you know, I think we all need to stand together when our communities are impacted in these ways and are under attack because it's so harmful. And, you know, Illuminative is very much done for the racism, or known for the research that we've done to really look at what are the dominant narratives in the United States about Native Americans. How do those narratives and perceptions impact the way that Native Americans are treated? What are the root causes of that? And what do we need to do to change that? And when we look at one of the greatest ways that Native Americans are harmed in this country, it's through erasure. Right? And it's about misinformation and false narratives. And through our research, we found that nearly 80% of Americans know little to nothing about us. And there's a really significant part of the population that aren't even sure if we exist. Right? And that's due to big systems in this country of media and K through 12 education, our governmental system in this country, you know, entertainment. These are big driving factors or systems that perpetuate and institutionalize our erasure. And erasure is one of the first and foremost ways that white supremacy and systemic racism impact our people. So when we think about this, what's important to know about advancing narrative change and about how we build power for Native Americans, it's understanding this erasure, which erasure just doesn't only affect Native Americans, right? We can go across many communities and look at the different ways that when we erase and invisibilize certain populations, how easy it is to rationalize harm, right? To rationalize violence and certain policies that marginalize different communities. So Native peoples don't have a monopoly on that, but I think we definitely are one of the most greatly impacted communities by erasure. And when we look at this erasure and rewriting of history, right? When we don't acknowledge that first and foremost, the original sin first was genocide, followed right by slavery. And we look at these things and they are so intricately connected. And so when I think about what we need to do, it's really, we need to look at this power analysis, right? That really begins to understand the variety of different ways that white supremacy and systemic racism impact all of our communities. And that we need to look at the ways that we deepen, got it, the 5-minute warning, the ways that, that we need to work together to make these systemic changes, because none of us can do it on our own. And I think that that's really important to understand. And it's so important that we just deepen that and begin to understand, you know, what is going to be both the carrot and the stick, right? As we really look at addressing the ways in which our communities are represented in this country, and to really the carrot and the stick to really fight and dismantle racism and white supremacy in this country. I think on the flip side, you know, to look at how we advance narrative change and through the lens of building power for Native communities, I think that it's really about deeper investment, right? Because the erasure is so profound. When you think about it, 80% of Americans know little to nothing about us. That's big, right? And we look at the way that toxic stereotypes and false narratives really impact our people. We need deeper investments in Native communities, in tribal nations, to be able to engage in storytelling, right? To be able to engage in ways that they can uplift their contemporary, you know, our voices, our issues, right? The ways that we can deepen our ways that we are organizing across our communities, right? And really building these relationships of reciprocity, because we share so many goals about the different things that we want for our communities, and to really ensure that Native peoples are part of that. Because oftentimes when we talk about equity and diversity and inclusion, or we talk about BIPOC, a lot of people forget the BIPOC. The I in BIPOC stands for Indigenous, and we need to be intentional about that, because that erasure is so profound. And I hate to say it, sometimes in the most progressive of movements, oftentimes Indigenous people are left out of those conversations, when at this moment, and as ever the issues that we're facing in this country, everyone needs to be at the seat at this table as we think about organizing going forward and tackling not only the things that are against us, but building a new and better future. And so really that, again, that deeper investment into the infrastructure and across the ecosystem of what we call Indian country, I think is just really imperative. And so I'm just grateful for so many different people across, this field or across narrative and culture change work that have really been reaching out and trying to be more intentional about how they're working with Indigenous communities. And I just think, together we have power. We have power to shift things. But I really, my call to action for everyone today in this circle is, we can't let these things go by. And so we're asking you to follow our campaign, asking you to join us as we want to join all of you in your work as we're really working to fight these systems that are of oppression and harm in this country. And with that, again, follow us at Illuminatives. And, our model is really about collaborative organizing, right? And really looking at ways that we can deepen relationships and mutual understanding across different communities. And so we are willing to engage in more conversations in ways that we can work together, especially as we look ahead to the midterm elections and key issues such as, climate change, climate justice organizing, and really working on ways around gender equity and other key issues that are impacting all of our communities. So thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you so much, Crystal. And I just wanted to open up in the last couple of minutes. Does anyone have a question for Crystal? I've been super excited, Crystal, to see Reservation Dogs, Res Dogs on Netflix and just native produced media occupying center stage. I'm wondering if you have any reflections about what it took to get there and what does it mean to build the infrastructure for narratives that are produced by and for Native people? Okay, I think we might have lost Crystal, but thank you so much, everyone. We have 1 minute remaining. I'm going to drop the Instagram handle for Illuminatives in the chat, and we'll move on to the next part of our program. I think this is it. So I think that's one of them. Oh, here it is. This is the other one. Okay, everyone. So we'll see you in the next room. Thank you. Okay, this is the main room. Sorry. I don't want to confuse anybody. Don't leave. If you press leave, you'll leave the meeting. So Alicia's group is wrapping up and they'll be here any minute. Thanks for your patience.
Sorry, I got it back. I don't know. Sorry about that. I just wanted to, I don't know what happened. It's just a bad day.
No worries. We're so grateful you could even be with us today, Crystal. Thank you so much.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, you also follow them on Instagram. They are sharing all of this wonderful information about Native artists, Native film, Native media, or like all this really powerful work that we should all be connected to and supporting. So please go to their Insta and their website and support. Excellent. So thank you, Alicia. Thank you, Crystal, for your devotion to our young people and showing up today. We're going to now move into the narratives for the future we desire. So in this room, we're going to hear from Terry Marshall from Intelligent Mischief. And Terry's going to talk about the power of a radical Black imagination. And in the next room, we're going to hear from Ellen Buckman from Opportunity Agenda. And Ellen's going to talk about shifting culture through values-based messaging. So see you there.
Terry, feel free to come off mute when you're ready.
Okay, sorry, I was gonna ask, I was like, should I just begin? Switch over. Total apologies. Oh, God, it's all late. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Terry Marshall. I'm a founder and creative director of Intelligent Mischief. And I'm gonna present a slideshow real quick. I don't know if do you need anyway, like hand over controls to me or anything?
You should be able to share your screen. Do you see the?
Okay. Yes, let's see it. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for being with me. Cool. All right. So hopefully this will be smoother now throughout the rest. I'm gonna zip through this for y'all. We'll keep time going. Terry Marshall, Intelligent Mischief. Hopefully here today let people know the importance of imagination and to movement building, and also how you and your organization and others can use it for your purposes. Right. So first, talk about Intelligent Mischief a little bit, who we are, what we do. So my name is Terry Marshall. My partner in life and in crime, Aisha Shillingford. She's unable to make it here today, but she's at half Intelligent Mischief. We are a creative studio and futurist design lab that unleashes Black imagination to shape the future. Our purpose is to boost invention and imagination, realign action logic, and experiment with new forms of culture and civil society to create atmospheres of change. And we work at across the art, design, and popular culture to create spaces where Black folks can collectively imagine beautiful futures. And we focus on Black people and the Black radical imagination, but we believe that at its core is actually about liberating and freeing all folks, right? So that's included in our liberation and our focus, what we do. And hopefully later on, I could go into more concretely what we do. So our intentions for today, hopefully what people come away with is, what do we mean by imagination, particularly political imagination, and its importance to movement building, imagination and movement building, and how to unleash imagination for the purpose of social justice, social change. And what do we do as Intelligent Mischief? And what do we do that may help you and your organization or your members to use their imagination, unleash their imagination to cause social change, social justice change? So going to the quick definition, what do we believe is defining of Black imagination or Black radical imagination, right? And through our studies, these are some things we've discovered, that Black radical imagination is interdependent, the interdependent Black radical tradition and collective practice of freedom dreaming, the commitment to the assumption and embodiment of multiple ways of being and knowing there are many alternatives. So nothing that's just binary or one narrow single way. It's like very expansive and within the Black radical tradition. Co-creation, conjuring, envisioning of values, ideas, practices, formations, policies, systems, and structures that facilitate Black and Indigenous liberation and sovereignty. The capacity for joy, play, creativity, etc. Right? And that's something that gets downplayed, but as we're going to show some examples, why that, especially play and joy, creativity is essential to imagination and unleashing that for folks to change the world in different ways. Furthermore, in our studies, we discovered that Black imagination is grounded in Afro-Indigenous cosmologies. This isn't a complete study of this, but just saying one part of that is within various like African cosmologies and Indigenous world cosmologies, there's the belief that the interconnectedness of all things, whether that's material or immaterial. So between this world, the universal consciousness, ancestors, the those yet to be born, many Indigenous and cosmologies around the world talk a lot about that. And we can see how that becomes, you also see how that becomes practical for us in our lives, right? So we believe in a lot of like going back to move forward. What's the lessons? When we listen to ancestors, are we listening to our own our own knowledge of the collective people's knowledge and understanding, right? That's essential. It's not something to throw away. It's actually something that's essential to us dreaming of a different world. So we talk about imagination, we also talk about dreaming, right? And that's essential to world build, to changing the world. We'll get into world building later. There's non-binary, borderless, interdependent, regenerative, channels the trickster, Eshu Egbara, straddling worlds. That's a West African trickster god, right? Many and during the Underground Railroad, during slavery, people translate the trickster god into other new stories and narratives that they use for stories to help liberate themselves. So we also like talk about being a trickster, right? That's been essential to our liberation throughout our history. It's guided by ancestral connection, dreams, visions, intuition, rituals. So why is imagination important? So I'm gonna read through a couple of quotes from Robin D.G. Kelley and also Ed Whitfield, and also from the Civic Imagination Project based in University of Southern California, which just relay the importance of imagination to movement building. Where are we going? Who are we becoming? Without new visions, we don't know what to build, only what to knock down. We not only end up confused, rudderless, and cynical, but we forget that making a revolution is not a series of clever maneuvers and tactics, but a process that can and must transform us. It is from Robin D.G. Kelley's book, Freedom Dreams, The Black Radical Imagination, is a book that's heavily influenced us at Intelligent Mischief, right? But this is one of the main things about this is like imagination is visioning, which provides a roadmap. So we could be doing a bunch of actions and that may feel good, but where's it going? What are we building, right? And we focus a lot on deconstructing, destroying, tearing down, and also, but we also, every successful social movement has always had a vision that's guided to somewhere, and that vision has to start in the imagination. And we believe that a lot of times we've lost the practice of imagining or creating a vision that's so desirable, irresistible to others, right? Also from the Civic Imagination Project, why is it important, imagination? The civic imagination is a tool and process in which people come together to imagine a better world. Civic imagination is the capacity to imagine alternatives to current cultural, social, political, or economic conditions, and to imagine the process of change, to see oneself as a civic agent capable of making change. This Henry Jenkins for 2018. The civic imagination is the foundation of a greater process in which ordinary members of society come together to share the change they want to see in the world. So what they call civic imagination, we call like the political collective imagination, right? So people might say like, oh, you're just talking about imagination. Are you just talking about kids playing around? And we're talking about like, there's a larger purpose, there's a larger goal to imagination when we talk about it, right? And what's the civic imagination? What's the larger political collective imagination that allows masses of people to imagine together, to see themselves as agents in their own change? This also for Robert D.G. Kelley. We have a right and responsibility to imagine. We're not new to this, right? Revolutionary dreams erupt out of political engagement. Collective social movements are incubators for new knowledge. So imagination allows us to think of the new. Also, Robert D.G. Kelley, this system's not inevitable. Progressive social movements do not simply produce statistics and narratives of oppression. Rather, the best ones do what great poetry always does: transports us to another place, compel us to relive horrors, and more importantly, enable us to imagine a new society. We must remember that the conditions and the very existence of social movements enable participants to imagine something different, to realize that things need not always be this way. It is that imagination, that effort to see the future in the present, that I shall call poetry or poetic knowledge. And lastly from Ed Whitfield, but in order to hope for the master's house to burn as a field Negro would, one would have to have a vision of alternative, someplace to go so that we don't simply perish in the flames. We would have to have an image of freedom that's clear enough in our minds to guide our thinking and dreaming. So some of the core elements we pulled out of this movement building and for collective imagination: create alignment around cultural shifts towards a collective vision of the future, visionary organizing; transforms who we are and our understanding of reality; creates new forms of organizing social activism. That's a really big key part. It's not just doing the same old thing. We're creating the new. That's what imagination allows you to do. Imagines further than our current limitations, which are often opposed by oppression and being a constant state of reaction. Here are some tips from us, Intelligent Mischief, from an article that we did called Black Discourse that can be found Nonprofit Quarterly, on how to help you imagine, right? Rest is integral to dreaming and imagining. There is no dream without rest. There's a lot of studies coming out that a lot of the focus of capitalism and being productive, actually the dream of capitalism is have us be awake 24/7 so we could be our maximum productive selves. Rest is actually key and essential if we want to like dream and build a new world and actively create a new world, right? We need rest. It's hard to imagine a future when we are overwhelmed with our present. Make space, declutter. That's a big one from us. You need space. Create ritual and ceremony, honor the sacred in everything. This could be rituals that you create with your own, in your workshops, in your organizing, in your organization, what you do. Rituals help you, many artists use rituals to just push your mind right, get your mind right, push your mind in the space to imagine. We often do a workshop where we do play a video of just like traveling through space to just get people to like in the space to start to imagine how to imagine differently, right? You're not in the same world, you're different. Petit marinage, retreat, harness, fugitivity, steal yourself away, get away, put yourself in different contexts when you want to settle and say, don't just say, oh, we're just going to imagine, get out a piece of paper, really take the focus and time to look at your space, where your surroundings, and what does it mean? What's a good space to put yourself in order to start imagining? Look back to go forward. And this is the article you can find in Nonprofit Quarterly. It's a guide how to unleash Black imagination and shape the future. It goes in much more detail. World building for us in Intelligent Mischief is a tool. And so I'm rushing through this. I know I started late a little bit there. So I'm just gonna try to get this done and get it done and sufficiently for y'all. So world building was a literary tool that many filmmakers and writers use. We use it for workshops and for movement building. We often point to like Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech as an example of world building in a movement context. The Communist Manifesto, a friend of mine called like one of the greatest sci-fi stories all time. Like you're envisioning this world that doesn't exist yet, right? But you're convincing people to a vision that they're all fighting for, right? So every great movement has like world building involved. So world building is a tool for collective imagination and reimagine our shared values and assumptions, reimagine our shared narratives, reimagine our policies, systems, and structures, reimagine our practices, behaviors, identities, relationships, and cultures. This is essential in order to world building and social transformation. What we do is Intelligent Mischief. We always start with our methodology of world building. We do creative production. We've created Black by Survival Guide. It's a multimedia project where we create ridiculous tips for telling Black people how to survive in a racist world with intersectional analysis. We've created A Nation X, which is a story world that we did 24-hour online story, immersive storytelling with folks, where we had this world where there's a secret maroon society that's been trying to liberate Black folks for over 500 years. And they now use DJs as agents. So we do an online party and immerse people in this world. The next phase of that is to be a comic book, an AR comic book, we're hoping. And we're also pitching an animation called Love of a Black Planet, where Black folks escape to another planet, but also telling stories of like acceptance and liberation and how that's connected. We do workshops and labs where we do Black Rag Imagination workshops and labs, and we also consult and do cultural and creative strategies with organizations. You can find us at intelligentmischief.com or on Instagram at Intelligent Mischief. And I'll end it right there.
Thank you, Terry. So powerful and so many gems. So I dropped the link to Terry's guide and article in the chat. Please follow them. We're so excited for what you shared and send our love to Aisha. So now we're moving into impacting mainstream narratives. So in this room, we have with us Romain from PopShift, and Romain's going to talk about the power of pop culture and how racial and social justice movements can connect to Hollywood screenwriters and producers. And then in the second room, we're going to have Marisa Franco from Mi Gente and how movements define mainstream narratives. This is the last TED Talk session. Right after this, we're going to move into our conversation as a community to make meaning in 4 different breakout groups. So we'll see you at 3:35.
Hello, hello.
Hey, Romain, welcome.
Hey, thanks. So good to be here. You've really done such a good job bringing such an inspiring, exciting group of folks together. So huge congrats.
Feel free whenever
Shall I jump in? Awesome. Cool. So hello, everyone. My name is, here, let me take my headphones off, actually. So hello, my name is Romain Vakilitabar, and I first want to acknowledge that I'm living and breathing on the unceded lands of Indigenous people, most specifically the land of the Tonga and Chumash people, among many others who were forcibly displaced, whose culture was forcibly suppressed. So like I mentioned, my name is Romain, he, him pronouns, and I'm honored to be here, truly. Such an amazing group of folks who spoke before me. I'm the founder of Pathos Labs, a nonprofit laboratory finding ways that media and entertainment might be used in service of pluralism and liberation. And one of the main projects we're working on is PopShift, which is a community of some of the country's leading television writers, showrunners, producers, who we bring together with people from different communities, people with different lived experiences, so that we can build relationships. We believe that we need to change the landscape of entertainment so that the people who are in the writer's room reflect the beautiful mosaic of identity that exists out there in the world. We believe that building relationships between people from these communities and showrunners and executives and producers is a way that we can help build power together. So I'm joining here today with actually more questions than answers, and more curiosity than convictions, especially because I recognize the collective brilliance of everyone who's in the room today. So I hope you don't mind if this session is a little bit participatory, because I personally would appreciate your wisdom. So first off, I'd like to do some level setting so that we're first all on the same page. And even if you might disagree, I think for the purpose of inquiry, I'd like for us to maybe acknowledge some of these ideas. One is that narratives determine our reality and our truth. And so many people have spoken to this earlier today, but a story that I think of is a story of a young boy who's grown up in the fields of Kansas, watching his father go and work on the oil rig, being told after many generations that, you know, the work of his father, of his family, is actually bringing energy to the world, bringing energy to the country. And this little boy, hearing this story over and over again, gets a particular definition of reality that's probably very different from people who've grown up with creation stories in Native communities, for example, that tell the story of how we are of the land, and as so in service of it, and that oil pipelines are not powering our world, but are poisoning our world. So our definition of reality is subjective to the stories and narratives that we've been told. So that's the first acknowledgement. Second is that in this informational landscape that we all occupy, we have to really, at this point, flood our narrative landscape with new narratives. One story at a time won't quite cut it anymore. I'm reminded of the story of Cesar Chavez and the National Farm Workers Association. And a couple students drove across the country to go listen to Cesar Chavez speak at an event. And they waited in line to attend this session, and they were the first at the microphone when he wrapped up to ask a question. And they asked Cesar Chavez, "Excuse me, Mr. Chavez, we've traveled across the country to be here today. We want to ask you one question." And the question is, how are you able to mobilize millions of people through your work? And Cesar takes a beat and says, well, I had one conversation, and then I had another conversation, and then I had another conversation. And these two students, frustrated, press Cesar Chavez and say, no, but you mobilize millions of people. How are you able to mobilize that many people? And Cesar Chavez says, I had one conversation and then another and then another. And I think our landscape has changed a little bit because we're now living in an information age where we are flooded with narratives, flooded with information, and the one story at a time, as powerful as it can be and as powerful as it has been in the past, I think we need to think about how we can tell stories in ways that reach more people all at once. So it brings me to my third point, which is I think that television writers hold a lot of power. And a story that I think of is the story of how in the 1980s, the rate of drunk driving in the United States was at an all-time high, and people were trying to figure out what to do about it. And a Harvard professor finds out that in Sweden, they actually have a low rate of drunk driving. So he goes there to find out why. And upon his trip, he realizes that that in Swedish, they have this term, this concept that doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. And it's the term designated driver. It was something unique to their language that didn't exist in any other language outside of Swedish. And so he comes back, this researcher comes back to the United States, really trying to popularize the term designated driver. And no one pays much attention until he meets the writers of Cheers and the writers of The Cosby Show. And he asks them to just introduce the term in their shows. And they do so, and over 30 million people are exposed to the new concept of a designated driver, and it changed behaviors en masse. So my third point is television writers hold a lot of power, and we believe we need to bring people together, people with insights together with these television writers to bring forth new collective ideas and imaginations of what behaviors are possible to uproot the old. And then fourth that I'd like to acknowledge is that narratives have to be seated in community, because ultimately narrative is about power. And if we want to create systemic change, we have to challenge the structures of power whereby the dominant narratives originate. And I think it means hyper localizing and creating powerful narratives that can really reach a lot of people, but first seated in community. So the organization I run, we built kind of our theory of change to support some of these four principles. One, to remind you, narratives define our reality. Two, that we need to flood our narrative landscape with new narratives. And one narrative at a time is not quite going to do it anymore. Three, television writers play a big role. And four, we need to be seated in community in order to do so. So last week, for example, we brought together 50 showrunners, creators of some of Hollywood's most prominent stories, together with 50 disability leaders to share space, to build connections, to build partnerships. Yesterday, I just had a conversation with the creator of a CW show who we worked with, that said she hired a trans person that we introduced her to be the head writer of a new show that she just got greenlit. So, these connections, these relationships matter. Having a trans person at the helm of a writing team to tell a story that millions of people will engage with, I think is really how we bring forth systemic change. So we believe in like this idea of nothing about us without us, right? And I know all of you all practice that through your work, and we aim to be a place where those who reflect the mosaic of identity can be given the power to tell stories that reflect the complexity and the beauty of the mosaic of identity that surrounds us. So I'll stop there, and I would love to open it up, because I need your help. I'd love to hear from you all as practitioners in this space. How can we foster stronger connections between the youth serving racial and social justice movements and the narrative producers in Hollywood. You know, I'm admittedly not a youth serving racial and social justice practitioner myself, so I defer judgments to you all, and I would love to hear your thoughts. And if you don't mind, maybe entering into the chat, you know, what sorts of narratives do you think we should flood into the narrative landscape? What sorts of narratives do you think we have an opportunity to see on screen that serves the work that you're doing, that serves racial and social justice as it relates to youth in the United States? And I hope, you know, through getting your thoughts in the chat, and I'm seeing, hopefully, yeah, haven't seen any chats come in yet, but I hope to see some. I hope this serves as a sort of crowdsourcing where we can share ideas together to imagine exactly what sorts of stories we need more of. So if you don't mind, I mean, I would be grateful for any ideas that you all may have to flood the chat with any narratives that you think we have an opportunity to see more of in a way that can really reach hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people across the country. So I'll pause there, and I'm going to be vigilant of the chat. So I'm looking at it. If anyone has any ideas, any reflections, would love to get your contributions as well. And I don't know if there's a way even to bring you into the conversation, maybe to unmute you. I don't know if I've been spotlit, but maybe we can spotlight some folks who might have something to add.
Sure, and folks can, Roman, folks can unmute themselves, and as folks are thinking about narratives that you think are very relevant, particularly to the young people that we serve, I'm also curious to hear what are the changes that need to happen in the infrastructure of connection. So you're doing this great work of bringing leaders directly and creating access to these screenwriters. I know Marcia from Firelight is actively involved in building out a broader infrastructure of filmmakers of color who can tell narratives where communities will be speaking for themselves. And so just curious, you know, there's a lot of folks here who are narrative producers as well. What are some of the other things, in addition to the specific narratives, that we also need to tackle and create to make sure that that infrastructure is built? Have you seen the screenwriters change their minds about how to be in relationship with community? How do you sustain that connection to community from folks who are in those rooms?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I appreciate that. I think, you know, the reason we focus so much on relationships is because, like I said earlier, we're all living in this information age where access to information is ubiquitous. And sure, there's always a need for more information to be shared and spread around, but I think the impact is longer lasting when you bring people together in a place where power can be redistributed. I think a lot of storytellers in Hollywood who have benefited from the system acknowledge the fact that that's been the case and are very serious about redistributing some of the access that they have been given to those who may not have had the same privilege that they've had. And so I think, you know, for us, what we've noticed is we have over 200 showrunners and television writers who've engaged. And I think it's because we're creating a safe space by which they can engage and build relationships with people from different backgrounds, from different communities, writers who are maybe still a little bit more junior level, who are looking for that big break, the opportunity to be a part of a writer's room. So creating a space where all of them can meet, I think, will be conducive to that power being redistributed. It's not guaranteed, obviously, and we really kind of level set as an organization that's why we're there. You know, that's what we're hoping to do. And it's been really cool to see that there's a lot of receptivity amongst the showrunners who join us every time. And every month it's really focused on a different community, a different group of people who have a different lived experience, who have different insights and ideas based off of, you know, the circumstances governing their upbringing and who they are, and the communities that they've been born and raised into. So, you know, I think like we're able to consistently bring showrunners in front of amazing individuals who have different insights and ideas, who have a lot to contribute, to start to build, you know, the idea that the people they're meeting could potentially be, you know, writers in the writers' room. And like we're really focused on predisposing that idea and showcasing just the amazing creative ideas that exist amongst the people that we're bringing into the room. Hopefully, you know, expecting that future collaborations may be able to take place. So yeah, I don't know if that completely answers your question, Manuel.
It does. And I want to just thank you for your hard work to continue to open doors and create access for our communities, and also lift up those pipelines of really brilliant storytellers, where we get to speak for ourselves and tell the stories that we know will resonate, because they're more grounded in experience and truth. So thank you for your work, Romain. So everybody, we have come to the end of our ice escapade. I used the analogy of skating earlier today. And now we're going to skate into community. We're going to skate into conversation. We're going to skate into dialogue. And so we have 4 caucuses on meaning making. The first one is a focus on youth and criminal justice. And so that will be the meaning making caucus here in the main room. The second one will be a focus on young people impacted by the child welfare system and reaching for economic empowerment. That will be Breakout Room 2 with Daryl and Nayoka. The third one will be gender and immigration justice. That's going to be Breakout Room 3 with our sister fund, Communities for Just Schools Fund, and Sierra and Saida will be holding that space. And then the last breakout will be with our fearless leader, Elizabeth and Amel from the Surdna Foundation's communications team. They will be in Breakout Room 4, tackling broader racial justice. And so it is your choice. If you want to go to the room that deals with the work that your organization is doing, go for it. If you want to stay and jump around a little bit, we encourage you to pick a room and stay there. Your task is to answer 4 questions. You will say goodbye to everyone from your breakout room. So if I don't see you, thank you for coming along this ride with us. We will be sharing a document, a video of what we've all learned today, and returning this knowledge back to our young people who maybe were in school and couldn't join the programming. And then we want to just remind you to go ahead and fill out the evaluation form that will be shared at the bottom of the meaning making caucus. Please do not be shy. Go all the way in, name all of the things. We hope that the direction that you provide us, we can use it as an advocacy platform to move through philanthropy to support the really powerful work that you are all doing across multiple areas of the narrative change ecosystem. So without further ado, thanks again for coming, everybody. And I hope you make some fabulous meeting in the caucuses coming up. So see you soon. And then we will be starting here with the youth and criminal justice breakout. Thank you, Marcia, for your comment. Yes, solidarity with creative workers as workers. Yep, beautiful. So here, y'all, we're going to go ahead and send everybody to the Google document where we have our 4 questions that we've been tasked to answer. So I've dropped the Google document in the chat, and we will go directly to that document. I will share my screen. I think if Saida gives me permission to share my screen. Let's see. And if not, you can share your screen, Z, if you like. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Good. Okay, I think I got this. You're still spotlighted, Romain. I'm sorry. Okay, here we go. Cool. So everybody come off the mute. You don't have to stay silent. We're now in conversation mode. So feel free to jump into the document and start typing. You can go ahead and start typing. The first question is, of the things presented, what's one thing you want to see the organization do? And what would you need to do it? So I'm going to start with anyone who would like to speak. What's one thing that you heard or saw that you think your organization wants to explore? Anything that really resonated with you as a strategy, as a cool idea, as something that you want to think about? I think, would you like to speak? I see you. Anybody? What's one thing that resonates?
Manuela,
Yes, go for it.
can you hear me okay?
We can, go for it.
Hey, this is Liz Ryan. Sorry, I'm on by phone today. Well, there were so many great presentations and I didn't get to see all of them that I almost feel like my head is just full of a million ideas, and I'm super excited about this conversation. I think the one thing that I definitely want to see if we can explore is the idea of getting some young people in front of some of the Hollywood producers and writers, and if there's a way to resource the young people to be there in person and to even do like some type of internship or fellowship, even if it's long distance, to help influence the narrative shift that we want to see around young people.
Great idea, Liz. Thank you.
Yeah, Liz, I'll just quickly say I would love to chat more, because that's something that we're really trying to do, is get more youth in the writer's room to really be invested in the narratives that actually come out. We worked with the creators of the show Generation on HBO, and one of the, obviously, you know, the privilege of she grew up with two fathers, two of which are Hollywood producers, and she is a teenager, and she was really the creator of this show Generation, which is about high schoolers navigating high school and dynamics. And it felt so sincere, and it's really taken the world, or the high school world, by storm in terms of authenticity and genuine representation of the questions that high schoolers really care about. So, you know, we think there's such an opportunity in bringing young people into the writer's room, so that, you know, the narratives that emerge about their community, about, you know, being young, and the difficulties of being, you know, a teenager are real, and feel like they're the stewards of their own narrative. So yeah, I would love to chat with you, Liz, about that.
Definitely, thank you.
Awesome. Any other ideas? Or I'll read the other 4 questions, folks, so that if there's one that resonates with you more. So the second question is, you know, part of the idea, and even Roman's invitation, is that we need to flood the world with the narratives that we want to see. And we've heard this from a lot of our other presenters. As a field of leaders and institutions that are generally moving in the same direction around a vision for racial justice, what does this field need collectively to shape narratives? Is there a shared strategy? Do you have shared staff? Is there a shared story? What is our shared vision? And what do you not need? For example, and these questions were offered to us by ReFrame for us to tackle as a field, right? You know, do we need a press database? Maybe that's not what we need, right? And so just curious, folks, what do you need as a field, either to build connections across institutions, to build capacity? What do you have? What would you like to share? What do you not need? And then the 4th question is, what can you offer others as a group of organizations in motion, headed in the same general direction? So feel free to come off mute and feel free to add your voice to the conversation. What do you need? What do you not need? And what can you offer? Think about in your organization. You know, some folks said, we don't even have a comms person. Why? This is cool, but I can't do any of this. Some people said, we're already doing this. We can't impact the whole world. We just need to talk to our folks in the right ways. So think about all the levels at which you're trying to influence narrative. What do you need? What do you not need? And what can you offer? Ooh, I'm going to start to call on people. Go ahead, Roman.
Yeah, well, I was just gonna say, I feel like consolidating, you know, having a shared strategy for what narratives we push out together, I think is really important, because, you know, if we all together, you know, focus on similar kinds of narratives, then I think that's how we flood the narrative landscape together in partnership, in community. So I feel like, you know, that's one of the questions that I've been trying to think about is, you know, what does it look like when we all come together with a shared, you know, narrative strategy for what sorts of narratives we need more of.
And is there an example that comes to mind, Roman, about a shared narrative that you think had a potential for lots of organizations to latch onto?
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about, like, for example, the like how perceptions of gay marriage changed so drastically. And, you know, over the course of 30 years, perceptions of gay marriage have really flip-flopped in the sense that before it was, I think, like 20% openness to gay marriage in the 1980s. Now we're about almost 80% of people open to it. And I think it was a concerted effort amongst a lot of people in the field, really focusing, for better or worse, on gay marriage. You know, even though marriage can be perceived as a problematic institution, there was still kind of a consolidated strategy and effort around that being the topic, that being the narrative that folks in the community, organizers, activists were really trying to move the needle on. So I think it was just, you know, a focus in terms of, you know, what is the narrative that we want to move forward. What is maybe the most productive use of our time and resources. And I feel like that alignment can be helpful. So that's just one example that quickly came to mind.
Sounds good. Thank you, Roman. And Natalie from Dignity in Schools campaign. What do you think?
So this is kind of an answer to 1, 2, and 3, I guess, because I was thinking about Rinku shared how we do need to be honest about what the barriers are. And then Danielle, when they were speaking about restorative justice, and so we really needed to talk about violence and the causes of violence, and incarceration at the site of violence, schools too. So I was just thinking about that maybe we just need to be more willing to engage with those questions. I think typically what we do in the school to prison pipeline work is try to pivot away from because we don't want to always be associating youth of color with violence. I think sometimes maybe we don't address enough the concerns of what people's experiences of violence actually are. In the comms side of the work, I think we do it like in other spaces. I think that's scary and difficult to do. And so I think maybe in terms of like as a field, and I don't know a lot of the folks in this room, but maybe we just need to be having like a little bit more direct conversations with each other about like the way we're speaking about this work, and yeah, how to lean on each other to get into the more difficult stuff.
That's great. Thank you. And I hear your invitation for like convening or space to come up with like a really nuanced, intentional narrative around this piece in particular on STP. Right on.
And I think also like in addition to space, maybe it's just like I've been thinking about this a lot lately. Again, no one here, but like maybe we can also be like, hey, I noticed you were talking about it this way. Like, I'm just wondering like how you guys landed there, and like this is what we're thinking, because we're not always going to be on the same page, but it would be, I think it would be good to like talk those things through, even kind of one-on-one in a casual way too, to understand, you know, how we're framing things and why.
That's great. Excellent.
Manuela, can I make one other suggestion?
Sure.
So I was thinking that I think it would be super helpful to do like a little bit of a community mapping of what functions do we already have in the field and where some of the gaps are. And that could take place through, you know, some strategic look at like what everybody's doing. And then I also think even just the definition of narrative change. I mean, there were a number of different definitions that were shared today, and sort of like having a common understanding of what we're talking about, what the strategies are, what strategies we're utilizing now, and where some gaps are. Because I think it's hard to envision what we should be doing without knowing more about what everybody's doing in this space. And then, because I think that will be a strategic use of resources if we say, hey, there's gaps in these two areas. Like the Hollywood thing, like definitely came to mind, because that's one I know we're not doing anything in that space, but I don't know about other spaces as part of the work.
That's great. That's helpful, Liz, as a concrete need. Yes. Do others agree? Do other folks think that the mapping would be supportive to you as well in the work that you're doing? If you don't want to come off mute, you can throw a little thumbs up or a raised hand if you like.
This is Allison Corn. I think yes, and I think it really contributes to question number 4, because once we know what one another's doing, then we can offer help to one another and or to figure out how to collaborate. And I'm just so you know, I've been working on a project called Incorrigibles about the history of young women's incarceration and doing quite a few oral history interviews with women who were incarcerated when they were young, and kind of trying to create connections with people who are doing work to end young women's and young people's incarceration today, and how to support families.
Great, thank you, Allison. How can people find you? Maybe if you drop it in the chat as well for points of connection.
Sure.
That's great. Are there other pieces, y'all? You know, despite how much all of you may already know that incarceration is not effective at all for young people, it seems to still have a tremendous challenge to be embraced as a point for the broader community or society. And so just curious, you know, Liz, I know you've been doing this work for a long time, and others, like how are you mapping the shifts around criminalization, around policing, and what are you seeing are narratives that are resonating for people? Or what are you seeing in terms of infrastructure or connections between organizations and strategies that we may want to replicate? You know, Marcy dropped in the chat earlier, in the campaign for youth justice work, folks were being trained to talk about prisons and incarceration in a particular way. And I wonder if that way is still effective. Amity said, don't talk about it the way other people are talking about it. That's a way that we can see how to innovate and create new openings for people. But I wonder, Emily, Carter, Yamari, do folks have Amy, anything you may want to share around what you heard today? Was there an idea that you particularly loved? What would you ask funders to do? What was confusing? Or just like, I don't buy it. Anything at all. All right. So unless folks have anything else they want to share, I'm going to turn our attention to our evaluation form. So I'll just drop that in the chat really quickly for everybody. Oh, okay. Amy, thank you. I loved and will take to heart that starting with facts isn't the way to go. That's right. That's right. And that piece on the facts doesn't always catalyze people into action, doesn't move them or compel them to do and behave differently. That was really powerful for me as well, Amy. All right. Is anybody working with artists and other cultural workers? Just curious. And if so, how do you do that? Right. Okay, so I will not keep you anymore. Just want to respect the pace that we have. Oh, Carter, thank you. It was refreshing to view how folks are using narratives in a powerful way. As an artist, I tend to stick to I think there's more coming, so I'll be patient. Yeah. Awesome. So for those of you who are preparing to depart, please take 2 minutes to fill out the evaluation form. We really count on your wisdom and suggestions for how to improve these opportunities to be in community and learn together. That Google Doc is open to all of you. If you want to take a look at what the other groups were saying, that would be fantastic. And we welcome that as well. Cool. So if there are no other questions, you guys, we will get moving on to the rest of our day. I just want to thank you all for joining us, for being here with us today, for your powerful work. And please keep in touch. If there's anything that Andrus can do to support the advancement of your work, we are coming out of this session. We're going to share videos and make the learnings and the presentations accessible on our website. And we also want to help support the dialogue within philanthropy. And what is the call to action that you might have philanthropy embrace around what you need and how to get there to advance narrative change. So Carter, yes, refreshing to view how folks are using narratives. Yep. And Natalie, thank you. Thank you, Natalie. Okay, everybody, be blessed. Thank you for joining us. And I will see you on the other side. Hope you enjoy the rest of your Monday afternoon. Okay.
Thank you, Manuela.
You're welcome. Take care, Liz. Drive safe. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Ciao, everybody. Roman, thank you. In touch soon. Thank you so much.
Bye, Manuela.
Take care.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, bye.
Bye. Awesome. Okay, you guys. So I'm gonna head outside. I don't know if you might want to stay on until group 4 departs, but yeah, you're all set, Luis. Group 1 is done. So thank you for joining us, Mayra, Luis. I think as room 2 and room 4 wrap up, just wait to exit the space. Karina, thank you.
All right, Manuela.
Great. So I'll see you soon, Z. Thanks for, don't forget to copy the chat, and we'll talk soon. Take care.
All right. Yep.
Bye, everybody. Great job.
Thank you all for joining. Hope you enjoyed